Goku, Superman, Gojo, Uncle Grandpa.
Good morning.
There's a lot of strong characters that nerds on Twitter love to fight over. But if the Book of Bill has taught me anything, it's that Bill Cipher is absolutely a force to be reckoned with as one of the most powerful characters in all of fiction. I mean, the only thing that managed to destroy him didn't even keep him dead for all that long. He's a handshake away from reigniting the apocalypse. And we don't know the extent of his power after all of this time. Like, you may know that he can possess the living, but did you know that he can also possess the dead? Multiple corpses at the same time. Did you know that he can see into a buttload of possible future realities and figure out which one is the most likely? Or that the devil himself didn't even want Bill chilling in his domain? Okay, that last one isn't a power, but it was still worth mentioning because, whoa. This Dorito-shaped dream demon has a pretty extensive arsenal of abilities, so I wanted to lay them all out on the table so we could unpack just how terrifying Bill Cipher truly is. Also, this is a re-upload because I was overconfident in my ability to remember every single detail about the show and got something wrong. But it was early enough in the day that a lot of people hadn't seen it yet, so I fixed it. We all take L's sometimes. The best place to start would be with one of Bill's signature abilities, deal making. Although it's not powerful on its own, it serves as a gateway between dimensions and a tactic for Bill to unleash some of his other abilities. Shaking hands with another being, often a mortal in the physical world, in order to facilitate a deal. Alternatively, mortals can also sign a soul contract with Cypher, which, as the name implies, sees a human fork over their soul in exchange for unending misery? I will say that contracts are probably more ideal for Bill if his plans rely on someone's long-term involvement. As we've seen that regular deals can be called off, it just won't save them from their current predicament. Usually Bill masks his true intentions in these propositions, often planning to possess those he strikes a deal with and never fulfilling his end of the bargain. But once in a blue moon, there are deals like the two he made with Gideon, where both parties genuinely get something out of their arrangement. It isn't really clear what Bill got out of their first deal in Dreamscaperers, on account of Mabel getting rid of the cultist Dan's vault. He just claims that Gideon would pay him handsomely. If I had to guess, Bill probably wanted the chance to raid Stanley's mind to see if he could learn anything new about Ford, because frankly, he's obsessed with the guy. Or maybe Gideon was going to give him the chance to look through journal number 2, in the event that it had information that was useful to Bill. Maybe Bill just wanted to get a feel for the Zodiac Squad, knowing they'd chase him down in Stan's mind, and thus he could see if they were threats to his mission, foes who were worth taking seriously. Maybe he just wanted to stir up some chaos. Any of these answers check out to me. But again, the circumstances of the deal are just super vague. Now, the deal Bill and Gideon make off screen after the Stanchurian candidate is much easier to piece together. Gideon is granted freedom from prison, but when Weirdmageddon begins, he has to serve Bill as one of his horsemen of the apocalypse. Sorry, Nathaniel. When Gideon violates this deal and attempts to betray Bill, he's locked in a cage, thrown in a sailor suit, and forced to dance endlessly for Bill's amusement, still serving him in the apocalypse just as entertainment. As for Blendon, we're given insight into his deal with Bill in the Real Life Journal 3, as a coded message reveals that after being scolded by Time Baby and his peers, he wished that he could earn Time Baby's respect. So Bill swoops in through a dream and offers to make Time Baby leave him alone for good. And all Blendon has to do is shake his hand. Blendon, being oblivious and impulsive, took Bill up on his offer, and next thing he knew, Bill sighted an apocalypse. This perfectly demonstrates how Bill is very careful with his wording and will screw anyone over with a deal, because technically, he did make sure Time Baby left Blendon alone by killing him, even if Time Baby's gonna regenerate later. And now Blendon is stranded in the 1880s after fleeing from the Time Police because they blame him for murdering Time Baby. Never trust a Dorito. Now, deals don't seem to strengthen Bill's powers, or at the very least, that's never been specified. An abundance of deals just seems to give him more insurance, extra options if he needs a spare vessel or some strings to be pulled. Though if he owns your soul, he's probably gonna eat it, which might explain why he's been alive for over 1 trillion years. Next up is Cypher-Voyance. Yes, that's what Bill actually calls this power. Being based off the Eye of Providence, it should be no surprise that Bill has his own spin on clairvoyance. It's been said before in the show itself, but Bill has eyes everywhere. And he's not just talking about cults and pawns, no. It's a bit more literal. Bill can see through any depiction of him. Doesn't matter if it's drawn, scratched, spray painted, or burned. If it even vaguely looks like a triangle with an eye, it's a personalized peephole for old Billy. So he might be in your wallet as we speak. A lot of $1 bills in the world. This is why he was so locked in with the Pines family. The stained glass window in the attic, the rug near the vending machine, Fork's gigantic shrine that he kept covered in his study. Hell, you could even make an argument for the portal and the window above Dipper and Mabel's beds. Bill was playing I Spy all over the Mystery Shack. Not to mention the abundance of bills scattered all throughout town. He's programmed into one of the cabinets at the arcade. The Northwest have a tapestry of humans worshipping him. The portal being bill-shaped means he's lurking in McGucket's laptop. He might even be able to see through the trees. I don't know, these became actualized in the Mindscape, so I choose to believe it. This transcends the regular old Gravity Falls universe, by the way. The Bill Easter eggs in shows like Rick and Morty and Amphibia? Those are monoculars for his amusement. We actually get an idea of how he spies on people in the last Mabel corn, where the end of the episode shows Bill in the Nightmare Realm, watching over Dipper and Fork through an orb as they cipher-proof the Mystery Shack. I imagine this orb can take on different forms though, as he's watching some of Dipper's memories through a TV in the Book of Bill. But maybe that was just a man cave he whipped up for himself in Dipper's mind. Although deals might not make Bill any more powerful on their own, apparently these little bills might. He claims that the more he sees, the more powerful he grows. Which it wouldn't surprise me if that was literal. But it might just mean that the more he sees, the more he learns. And as we all know, knowledge is power. Bill knows lots of things. Because he's been picking puppets on Earth pretty much since mankind's inception. He's witnessed more history than any living being on the planet. He's also seen the literal secrets of the universe through a keyhole. And retaining everything he saw speaks volumes to how sharp his mind is. But seeing everything everywhere all at once isn't the only thing that comes with Cypher-Voyance. Bill has the ability to gaze into infinite timelines. He doesn't subscribe to the idea of there being one definite future that he can see into, because the future's constantly changing. What he can see is infinite possibilities across a spectrum of probability, and with his expert deduction skills, he can determine which future reality is the most likely to occur, though that means it's probably also a future he manipulated into happening, if there was a chance he could benefit from it. He can see pretty far into the future too, as he knows at least one future where Ford dies of a heart attack at 92 years old. With this ability, Cypher's also able to see all the realities where Dipper and Mabel were killed during their summer vacation, which apparently was every single timeline but the one we saw occur on screen. It's possible that Bill has the power to traverse between all these other realities, as he teases the idea of these parallel pines getting the chance to gang up on Prime Dipper and Mabel someday in the future. We also got a whole video on this, check it out. I think it's very well established that Bill loves messing with people, but you know what else he also loves? My mom! Arson! Cypher is very proficient at pyrokinesis, or as he calls it, pyrokinesis? I won't question it, which seems to be a power that he was born with and struggled to control for quite some time. According to Bill himself, the children of Euclydia used to bully him in grade school, singing, "Cypher, Cypher, he's insane, starting fires with his brain," which is unfortunately a bar. And it shows that Bill was probably setting everything ablaze regardless of if he wanted to or not. Waves of fire often accompany his fits of rage, so it's definitely influenced by emotion. And as I covered in its own video, Bill's pyrokinesis is so powerful that he was able to burn his entire home universe out of existence, slaughtering every single Euclidean, including his own parents. It's also implied that Bill was the one who thought Time Baby from a giant glacier, so he could attempt to make a deal and travel back in time to stop himself from destroying Euclydia. But since that glacier was in the Antarctic, I'm not sure how this would have been possible without a vessel, and as we'll touch on later, Bill's powers don't carry over to anyone he's possessing. But But maybe this was another glacier in another dimension that Bill could access, during another instance where time maybe was frozen. It could have happened more than once. These guys live for a long time. Regardless, I don't know many fire users who are strong enough to decimate an entire universe with their flames. Sorry, Ace, Zuko, and Roy Mustang. The triangle has you beat at your own game. Where Bill really shines, however, is with the Mindscape, as it goes hand in hand with an array of his powers, like mind reading. When someone falls into the REM stage of sleep, their mind opens a tunnel up for Bill to slide through. Once he's in your mind, he can access all of your memories and learn everything there is to know about you. Keeping secrets from him is nearly impossible. He can directly invade your dreams whenever he pleases on some Freddy Krueger type of timing.
Fuck the prime time, bitch!
Once he's in your head, he's free to do whatever he wants to it. He can make you forget how to breathe, sleep, or eat for the hell of it. The only way to keep him out of your mind is with, well, actually something like tinfoil. Ford had an aluminum plate put in his head, but Bill said that was a tiny bit dramatic. Cypher seems to have limited influence over the physical world from the Mindscape, as he's forged the ability to knock people unconscious, at least when being summoned. Although Gideon was the one who was calling upon him, Mabel and Soos also got pulled into the Mindscape while falling asleep instantaneously, despite watching from a distance. Time standing completely still within the Mindscape, regardless of if they just happened to be in range, or if Bill knew they were there and pulled them in intentionally. The fact that well-rested, fully awake individuals can fall victim to his dream demon magic is wild. That said, it's much easier for Bill to pull you into the Mindscape when you're sleep deprived, as shown in both Sock Opera and the Lost Journal 3 pages in the Book of Bill. Cypher was able to take advantage of Dipper's obsession with unlocking the laptop by visiting him once at night in an attempt to bargain with Dipper, only to raise the stakes the next day and cause Dipper to hallucinate by making it seem as if the laptop is going to erase all of its data if he doesn't figure out the password in time. In reality, this safety protocol never existed and the laptop was fine, but not for long. Dipper got it easy compared to Ford, however, as Bill never used an illusion to inflict pain onto Dipper. We learned in the newly uncovered Journal 3 pages that after Ford and Bill's falling out, Ford slowly went insane as he stopped sleeping so Bill wouldn't be able to hijack his body. This didn't exactly work out in Ford's favor, however, as he'd collapse and wake up to find that Bill still had a joyride in his body, wreaking havoc all over town, which only pissed Ford off. But when he tried to stand his ground, things got a little intense. I was livid. I hurled the tape into the fire and screamed, "You have no power here! You're just in my mind! I can outlast anything you can—" When suddenly, something started to feel off. My vision flickered. The clock had stopped ticking. Something was wrong. Then, blackness, 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 blackness. Where was I? My body was paralyzed. I felt my bones being pulled slowly out of their sockets. It was excruciating. I tried to scream, but nothing came out.
Thanks, Sixer. You let me in your head. Do you realize what I can do in here if I want? I can flip a switch that makes every neuron burn with pain beyond imagination. I can rewire your optic nerve so the sky is below you. Play a tone that gets louder and louder until you
Bash in your own skull just to make it stop.
I can delete memories randomly, just for fun. Maybe I already have. What do you want to remember? Your mother's face? Your own name? Who are you anyway?
That's ridiculous, I shouted. I panicked. I couldn't recall my name. I began to shake. He flipped his finger like he was turning on a light switch, and it came to me. I'm Stanford. Flipped again. I went blank. I felt my sockets start to strain. Any second my tendons would pop. My bones would splinter. I fell to the ground on the verge of vomiting.
You're my property. Don't forget it. The hillbilly abandoned you. Your father won't want you returning without millions. You have no friends. And if you died out here in the snow, who would even miss you?
Turn on the portal. I've waited too long for this. By the way, I'm sending someone to steal your eyes. That's not a joke. I have a friend that will steal your eyes. You have 72 hours. Don't cross me again.
Yeah, like I said, intense. Bill claims that all of this was just a joke and that Ford's overreacting, which really says everything you need to know about how abusive their relationship was, but that's for another video. As a dream demon, Bill has the greatest grip on the reality-altering abilities that those in the Mindscape have access to, being able to conjure up anything he wants, but typically leans into horrors beyond comprehension. He's also able to make himself impenetrable. Even Dipper, Mabel, and Soos trying to cast him out was overridden by him just rage quitting. What sets Bill apart from everyone else, though, is that he still has access to these reality warping abilities in his physical form, making him nearly unstoppable. Alright, we're getting down to the wire here, so let's have a lightning round on the powers that we don't have extensive detail on, but are still worth mentioning. Bill's getting all the glaze today. Time travel. I mean, he had to make a deal with Blendon somehow, and Blendon lives in the future, at least before Weirdmageddon. If Bill is able to traverse in between different realities, then traversing between the present and future isn't completely out of the question, especially since he's able to stop time when Weirdmageddon begins. Shadow travel. He only does this once in sock opera, but it appears that as a two-dimensional being, Bill can traverse the Earth without a physical form exclusively through shadows, allowing him to keep a closer eye on his pawns. Duplication. Yeah, it's something he dabbles in. Teleportation. Yeah, it's something he dabbles in. Image projection. He can project holographic images from his eye or treat his body like a flat screen TV. Lasers. Lasers. Alright, it's time for the big one. Possession. Bill's most infamous ability that, if you ask me, is by far the scariest one because, oh my god, the Dorito was inside of me! 9 out of 10 times, this move is the reason why Bill's making deals. Trying to shake an unsuspecting mortal's hand so he can hijack their body, booting their soul out in the process. Though, judging by Ford, it appears that he can also just keep the host unconscious if they fall asleep or tag himself in momentarily. However, Bill's dream powers don't translate to the possessed. He's only as strong as the body he's inhabiting. Now, the show depicts those under Bill's control with the iconic Cypher eyes, with his voice coming out of their mouth. But in universe, the possession isn't that obvious to those around the host. According to Ford, possessed pupils are only slightly altered. A retinal scan can pick up on it, but unless you're inspecting their eyeballs up close and personal with a flashlight, it'll be easy to overlook. And although we hear Bill's voice come out the possessed mouse in the show, it just sounds like whoever got body jacked to the characters, which is demonstrated to us in Dipper and Mabel vs. the Future. That creepy but awesome moment where Bill's voice is overlaid with Blendon's was just for us, the audience. To Mabel, I think she just pieced together what was going on the second the rift broke. It's worth noting that there's only one life form whose pupils stay the same when possessed by Bill. Goats! And although there's nothing to suggest that Bill possessed Gompers during the events of the series, I don't think it's something we should rule out, especially for the future. Bill's possession always felt like the worst case scenario for his adversaries, because he thinks pain is hilarious and has no qualms roughing up the body he's in. This isn't ignorance either. Bill knows exactly what he's doing, which is very much emphasized in Journal 3 and the Book of Bill, with the revelations that he planned to kill both Dipper and Ford while in their bodies, writing to Mabel that he was going to jump off the water tower and make it seem like Dipper just went crazy, threatening to do the same to her. And while taking a joyride in Ford's body after they're falling out, he tried to call Stan to pretty much tell him that he was going to jump into a frozen lake and that he still hates him, which would have devastated the entire Pines family. I mean, maybe not their dad, but it's a fun thought. Bill's possession isn't limited to just inanimate objects like sock puppets or immortals getting swindled out of their autonomy. We learned that Bill is also able to raise the dead, animating an entire graveyard of corpses during his beef with Ford. Zombills! With bonesaw, shotgun, and lantern in hand, I trekked to the Valentino family mortuary, which I hadn't visited since my run-in with the grounds creeper. See Journal 2, Crit-Ids. I reminded myself as I crowbarred my way into the morgue that 19th century doctors frequently robbed graves in the name of science. Surely this was morally justified and wouldn't incur any sort of curse. No sooner had I retrieved a brain than I noticed the ground started to shake beneath me. It was at this moment that I learned two interesting facts. 1. Bill Cipher can possess corpses. 2. Bill Cipher can possess corpses! From the graves around me arose a horde of cackling cadaveres, eyes aglow. I raced for the car, blasting the invaders with my shotgun until only one stood, blocking my way. Shotgun in hand, I demanded answers. Why are you doing this? Why won't you just leave me alone? Even without a tongue, the zombie spoke in Cypher's unmistakable voice.
Oh, come on, Sixer. We both know you don't really want to be left alone. You love how important I make you feel, and I love having a pet human in my pocket. It's a win-win.
Don't forget which one of us is holding a gun. I warned him. He grinned an inhumanely wide grin.
Forzy, nobody else really gets you, do they? Without me, you'll always feel unseen, surrounded by adults who don't recognize your true potential. You've always felt alone in a crowd, haven't you? Who else will give you this feeling again? Even if you got rid of me, you'd miss me. Admit it, you'd miss me.
I hesitated. I have missed you, I replied. He smiled. But my aim is getting better! I blasted the last zombie to the ground, then shot 2 more times and spat where I stood. I was so exhausted I could barely stand, but I knew falling asleep would make me his next zombie. I picked up the brain and made my way home as snow began to fall. I admit I was pretty proud of my comeback. Pretty sure I heard that from Dad. I assume Bill's able to possess dead bodies because they're no longer occupied by a soul, which makes the idea of him jumping off the water tower in Dipper's body all the more disturbing. Knowing Bill, he would have waited till Mabel either found Dipper's body or his funeral to jump back in and parade Pine Tree around town one last time. The fact he can control multiple corpses at the same time is just nutty. While I doubt a bite from a zombie would turn you into one, as they presumably have the same limitations as other possessions, and like the cursed magic that brought the zombies in Karaoke to life, I imagine that strafe numbers would make it very easy for them to rip someone apart. There's always a shot at beating Bill so long as he's confined to the Mindscape, but should he gain a physical form, you better pray for a miracle because odds are, all hope is lost. As a literal living nightmare, there's no restrictions to Bill's abilities. His dream demon powers carry over to the real world, handing him control of time, space, matter, and well, reality itself. Just like in the mind, he can do anything. Rearranging every orifice on Nathaniel Northwest's face, transforming humans and ordinary objects into supernatural vehicles, willing his own domain to existence. Even the sky can't put a limit on him. Not to mention he created Mabel Land, a whole ass pocket reality designed to fulfill anyone's deepest desires. The addition of a physical form gives him some added perks. Since he's now a tangible being, he's vulnerable to physical attacks. To compensate for this, not only can he repel things from his eye, though he needs to be focused on the threat, but he also sports near instantaneous regeneration abilities. Although his eye does seem to take longer to restore than any other body part. Gaining a physical body also transforms Bill from a 2-dimensional being to a 3-dimensional being, enabling him to shuffle through an array of transformations, from a triangular prism to a 6-armed pyramid to a monstrous beast. Having a physical form doesn't stop him from jumping into the Mindscape either, as he's shown to hop between realms whenever he wants. His physical body just becomes stone in the process, which acts as insurance for Bill, because although his body is now a statue on Earth, if anyone comes into contact with the statue, he can possess their body and find another way to restart Weirdmageddon. Now you may be wondering, is there any way to kill this guy? Like clearly the memory gun didn't work, so what could put him 6 feet under for good? To be frank, that's its own can of worms that's worthy of its own video. For now, we've ran through all of his major feats, and I need to take a breather, so I think we're done here. Drop your thoughts on Bill's powers in the comments down below, and keep the conversation going over on Twitter and Insta at AllSharkVox and at Roundtable Vids. Gravity Falls season is upon us once again with the release of the Book of Bill, a new Gravity Falls book geared towards older readers. This book is loaded with a ton of new information around Bill and the lore of Gravity Falls itself. But it doesn't just shed light on some lingering plot threads, it also introduces new ones, directly setting up a brand new Gravity Falls adventure pretty early in the book, where Dipper and Mabel may have to face their greatest enemy yet, themselves. I want to break down this insane tease, running through all the Dipper and Mabel variants in the spread, and speculate on how this may be followed up on in the future. Is this just setting up another book, or could Alex Hirsch be testing the waters for full-on revival? A Gravity Falls sequel? I have some thoughts! And real quick, go buy the Book of Bill, y'all. It's worth it. I'm still making my way through it, but so far it's been worth every penny. I think it's the most unique Gravity Falls book we've had so far, and it feels like the tone of this world has matured alongside the audience while still embodying everything that made Gravity Falls great. I can't recommend it enough. And even though we'll be making videos on some of the lore drops in this book, it is just jam-packed with so much content and personality that you'll still have an amazing time with it, even if you do know a handful of revelations going in. Also, if you end up enjoying this video, please throw it a like and subscribe to the Roundtable with notifications on so you never miss a Gravity Falls video. So the Book of Bill briefly touches on parallel dimensions, and so far, it feels like it was only included to tease this future project. Bill Cipher reveals that he's gifted with the ability to see into other worlds, stating,
"There's a world where every type what you make comes true. A lot of ducks in that dimension. A world where I'm a square. We don't talk about that world.
Gotta love the nod towards the fandom's tad strange.
A terrifying Chibiverse where everyone's arms and legs have been sanded down to nubs. And I can see worlds where the Pines family lost. Look at them. These two plucky little protagonists, happily ever aftering if I had care in their oversized heads. They don't consider for a single moment the sheer improbability that they got to exist in the one timeline where they kept all their bodily organs, out of the infinite timelines where they were erased, shattered, drowned, frozen, or dismembered before they can make it to 13. But I guarantee you that their less lucky dimensional duplicates think about them all the time. Maybe one day, all these parallel pines will get the chance to meet up face to face. Maybe one day in the future, all their good luck will finally run out.
This brings us to a jaw-dropping 2-page spread where Dipper and Mabel are surrounded by an army of parallel pines. Variants who presumably want to find a way into our Dipper and Mabel's dimension and fight to the death so that the last variant standing can assume the Prime Pines' identities. So let's run down the roster of Dippers and Mabels from these darkest timelines who want to go toe-to-toe with the Mystery Twins. Starting from the far left corner, we have Blind Eye Dipper, from a world where they lost in Society of the Blind Eye and had their minds erased. But since Dipper and Mabel have a knack for uncovering the town's secrets, perhaps Blind Eye even thought it'd be better to flat out brainwash them, convincing them that they were already a part of the society after their minds were wiped. Or maybe instead of opposing the society at all, Dipper folded and joined their ranks, repressing his bad memories instead of learning from them. Next to Blind Eye Dipper is a petrified Dipper and Mabel. In this world, they were caught by Bill's minions and petrified by eye bats, unable to stop Weirdmageddon. In this timeline, Bill won. There's Zombie Mabel. I'm guessing the zombies got to her before she could hit them with Taken Over Midnight. There's Ejected Soul Dipper. He never got his body back from Bill in Sock Opera. And in Journal 3, Bill revealed that he was actually going to jump off the water tower in Dipper's body, making it look like Dipper just went insane and offed himself. So perhaps this is Dipper's soul after witnessing that fate. We have Bill Mabel, or Babel? Mill? This is a variant where I want to see the full story because all we could infer is that Bill made a deal with her at some point instead of Dipper. Maybe this could have been around the events of Sock Opera. Maybe this was around the events of Dipper and Mabel versus the future. We don't really know. Though I do think this happening around Sock Opera would track because Bill could still go to Mabel and say he just wants a puppet, and in exchange he'll help put on the best puppet show anyone's ever seen. Either way, dark. We have 8-Bit Dipper, presumably from a world where he lost the fight against Rebel Mix Skirmish and Fight Fighters, and got transformed into a video game character. Or maybe Giffany trapped him in a game. It could easily be one or the other. We have Smile Dip Mabel, one who apparently never came down from her high. We have Gnome Queen Mabel. I'm guessing the old leaf lore trick didn't work out in this timeline, and the gnomes forced her hand. Which makes me wonder if Dipper's even alive in this world. Still, this is some really cool payoff after 12 years. We have Wood Dipper, a fate that we briefly saw in Northwest Mansion Mystery, but I guess in this timeline, Pacifica didn't open the gates of the Northwest Mansion, so Archibald Corduroy never passed on, and Dipper remained petrified. Dark. And then next, I think we have a Summerween Dipper and Mabel. Dipper's covered in candy, his clothes are torn, Mabel's hair is trashed. I feel like these could be a reference to another episode, like, they look a little bit familiar, but skimming through early episodes, I couldn't find them, and the Summerween monster's guts is candy, so it just kinda tracks to me. But if this was a reference to something else, please let me know in the comments. But for now, I'm just assuming they got eaten by the Summerween monster. We have Zombie Dipper with a decaying arm. Again, I guess they didn't get to hit that 3-part harmony. We have what's either a wax replica of Dipper melting, or Dipper himself got turned into a wax figure, and he's been tragically struck by sunlight. I'm real curious about what happened here. We have the fan favorite Bipper. This seems to be from a timeline where Bill kept Dipper's body and was getting into all sorts of shenanigans. We have Tiny Dipper and Mabel from the episode Little Dipper. I guess they never returned to the normal size, and they're angry about it. We have a Dipper who actually got stabbed in the back with shears by Gideon, something that almost happened in The Hand That Rocks the Mabel. That's gotta leave a mark. And we have Amulet Mabel, who's also from The Hand That Rocks the Mabel. We can tell because she's wearing an identical sweater and has the same glow effect. If I had to guess, she didn't get to save Dipper as he was falling to his death in this timeline. So she spiraled, keeping the amulet and maybe becoming a feared witch among Gravity Falls. God, I want to see that! And we have Blind Eye Mabel. Same deal as I said with Blind Eye Dipper. They either mind wiped her and said, "No, you're part of the society, yes, no, stay. Or she folded and joined them without getting her memory wiped. Which would track, since she was already contemplating memory erasure in the episode. And last but not least, we have Time Displaced Dipper, or a Dipper who's erased from existence, which I imagine is either from the Time Traveler's Pick or Blendon's game, since he has the time travel tape measure. Oh, and Dipper clone number 2. He's not new, so I forgot about him. Now, we can't make out every Dipper in Mabel. There are a ton that are obscured, but these are the most notable ones with distinguished features. And I love pretty much all of these scenarios. Yeah, I'm not going crazy over the Summerween timeline, but I dig that how these variants ended up with these fates is for now left up to the imagination. Not all of them have super obvious origin stories. But with that said, where is all of this even going? Well, this book is setting up another Gravity Falls related announcement for next week. Maybe it's tied to this. If I had to guess though, this setup is either a hook for a sequel to the Lost Legends graphic novel, where the Parallel Pines will be one of 4 new stories, or it could be setting up some sort of revival. Maybe a TV special or movie, as this would definitely be a story that could work as both a reunion and a victory lap for the series, celebrating what's come before while taking these characters to new places. And I think both outcomes are feasible. Gravity Falls is huge and still a moneymaker despite being off the air for over 8 years. The animation industry is interested in popular IP above everything else right now, so it really feels like the stars are aligning. Either way, Hirsch is definitely cooking up something. As for how these variants will get their hands on Dipper and Mabel in the first place, I think the most obvious answer would be Ford. But not our Ford, a different Ford in a timeline where he created a fully functioning portal. Maybe this Ford was broken by Bill's influence and molded a mad scientist persona. And when Dipper and Mabel get shipped out to Oregon for the summer, something very bad happens to them. So Mad Scientist Ford, who has a working portal, tries to scour the multiverse to replace his dead niece and nephew, only to inadvertently assemble the League of Bad End Dippers and Mabels, who take matters into their own hands. But that's just my twisted little pitch. As always though, these are just my thoughts and I'd love to hear yours. Do you want to see Dipper and Mabel face the darkest versions of themselves? Should it be as a book or a movie? Let us know in the comments down below, and keep the conversation going over on Twitter and Instagram at AllSharkFox and at Roundtable Vids.
Not too long ago, I made a video on this chilling illustration from the Book of Bill. One that presents an army of parallel pines plotting their revenge on the Dipper and Mabel we've come to know and love. Bill Cipher reveals that there's only one timeline where Dipper and Mabel survived the events of the summer. In all the other timelines, they either ended up 6 feet under or became the worst versions of themselves. In that original video, I mainly focused on the idea of all these variants coming together and fighting to the death to decide who gets to take Prime Dipper and Mabel's place in the multiverse. But now that a high quality version of the spread is out there, and the fan base has had time to speculate, I want to dive deep into every single one of these variants, running through every timeline where Dipper and Mabel died, or at least lost to the villain of the week.
How did Bill end up striking a deal with Mabel? Why did Dipper join the Society of the Blind Eye? What about the universes that aren't depicted here? I'm going to give you all the answers you've been looking for, so let's get started. Let's take it from the top and start with Gnome Queen Mabel, a timeline where Dipper and Mabel didn't even make it past their first big adventure without things going south. I imagine that the major change in this universe was Mabel complying with the gnomes and becoming their queen. We can even kind of see one of them lifting her up here. While this already isn't an ideal situation for Mabel, I think things took a darker turn from here. Dipper obviously wouldn't be cool with Mabel getting abducted and forced into becoming royalty. He tried to save her and failed spectacularly. Keep in mind, Mabel giving in probably means she never discovered that they're vulnerable to leaf blowers, and the twins would be unaware that the gnomes could be tamed by a dog whistle. So Dipper has no surefire way of defeating them. Even if he pulled up with the whole Mystery Shack crew, they'd be vastly outnumbered. They'd get crushed, literally. Dipper would have been killed by the gnomes, and any surviving members of his rescue party would become their human slaves, separated from the town as they're hidden deep in the woods. Bitter, heartbroken, and desperate to escape gnome kind, Gnome Queen Mabel has a far-fetched wish to seek out another universe where she and her brother could have defeated the gnomes and enjoy a peaceful summer. Little does she know that summer would have been anything but peaceful. Now keep in mind, Dipper dying at any point before the end of Gideon Rises means that Stan never comes into possession of Journal 3, and thus he's never able to make the portal operational, stranding Ford in the Nightmare Realm forever. Or it might leave Stan vulnerable to Bill's manipulation, as he's more desperate than before to fix the portal. But I don't think even the most dire circumstances would stop Stan from recognizing a fellow con artist. No shot he ever shakes Bill's hand unless it's to trick the demon himself. Next up is Blind Eye Dipper. As likely as it is that this Dipper is from a timeline where McGucket didn't save him from getting zapped by Blind Ivan, not only did it seem like the society just wanted to mind wipe them and throw them off their tracks rather than indoctrinate them, I also think there's room for a more compelling story, one where Dipper chooses to don the red robe. Dipper is a character who craves knowledge. He has a strong desire to learn everything there is to know about the world around him. It's why Bill is such a compelling villain for the show, because he has all the answers. He knows he can exploit Dipper's curiosity for his own benefit. For Dipper to sacrifice knowledge, he would have to be at his lowest point, where he's pushed past his limits and feels like he's seen far too much, hence covering his eyes with the hood. Not only does that embody the sentiment that ignorance is bliss, but it also sells a certain expression. Blind Eye Dipper looks very ashamed of himself. That drove him to start wiping the minds of Gravity Falls, himself included. So what exactly am I getting at? Well, I was thinking if Dipper's gonna fold and join the Blind Eye, then he needs to be in a terrible state of mind prior to the events of this episode. Something that would leave him racked with guilt. This is a timeline where one bad move derailed his entire summer. And combing through the series, I think I know where there could have been a divergence point that led to everything in Dipper's life falling apart. Into the bunker. That episode had so many close calls for the Mystery Shack crew, but there's only one moment where someone's life falls directly into Dipper's hands. And that's when the shapeshifter is fighting with Wendy. Dipper desperately tries to decipher which Wendy is the real deal. And although he ends up striking the shapeshifter in the timeline we're familiar with, what if in another reality he swung at the wrong Wendy? What if Dipper killed Wendy? What if he crossed paths with the Blind Eye, obtained a memory gun, and wiped his mind of anything Wendy? What if he wiped the whole town's memory of Wendy? What if the corduroys have no clue that there's a fourth kid missing from their family? Okay, that might be a bit much, but I do think something catastrophic like Wendy dying would lead Dipper to the Blind Eye. The gang is able to cover up the details so Dipper doesn't get imprisoned for murder, but Dipper feels guilty all the same. No words can change that. He feels incapable of redemption or salvation, feeling as if Wendy died because of his own selfishness. His pursuit for knowledge led directly to the demise of his friend, someone he cares for deeply, so he throws all of it away. While grieving, he's approached by one of the Blind Eye members and is sent down a dark path, helping keep the supernatural secrets of the town hidden from the masses so no one ever ends up in his position. Not to mention, if someone finds out that he's responsible for Wendy's death, he has to ensure that the truth stays a secret. Driven to the point of insanity, insanity, Blind-Eye Dipper dreams of a reality where everything can go back to normal. Now I can see Blind-Eye Mabel being the result of two scenarios. Dipper dying at any point prior to the events of the Society of the Blind Eye, or Blind-Eye even giving her a very interesting proposition. If something happened to Dipper, the entire town would be in mourning. He and Mabel made a name for themselves in Gravity Falls pretty quickly, so there'd be more eyes on Mabel than ever before, as everyone's worried about her, on top of her being sent back home sooner than later. While she's still in town, the Society of the Blind Eye would offer Mabel a chance to wipe her memory of brothers. But she knows that the Mystery Shack crew in particular wouldn't just move on from Dipper, they talk about him all the time. So she wipes everyone's memory of brothers, ensuring Dipper never comes up in conversation again. But Wendy forgets who her brothers are, creating a rather confusing situation for her at home. And if Stan forgot everything he knew about brothers, he'd forget about Ford, never finishing the portal and leaving Ford stranded in the Nightmare Realm. Alternatively, maybe Blind Ivan has a lucky guess and pieces together that Dipper and Mabel's parents might be getting a divorce, getting Mabel to join the Blind Eye with the goal of reuniting with her parents, so she can blast the idea of a divorce right out of their memory, hoping the Blind Eye keep the masses in blissful ignorance until that day arrives. Wax statue Dipper is a bit trickier to figure out because as far as we know, the wax statues were cursed, but they couldn't pass that curse along to human beings and turn them into statues. Who knows though? Maybe that was something they had up their sleeve, a hidden power reserved as a last-ditch effort to curse other people. Defeating Dipper and Mabel during their big battle and turning them into wax statues, melting the twins shortly after, forcing them to experience the same death they dealt onto the replicas. This wax Dipper could just represent Dipper getting killed by the wax statues and isn't meant to be literal, and ultimately it probably was just cool for the whole piece. But I don't like settling for boring answers. That's not what we do here. 16-bit Dipper might be a fate worse than death, as it implies that he'll spend the rest of his days getting beaten over and over in fight fighters. Because let's be real, who's going to be a Dipper main? He's been nerfed to hell and back. So I'm thinking if there's a hidden code to bring Rebel Skirmish into the real world, then maybe there's a code that can bring a real human being into the game, which happened to this Dipper, trapping him inside the arcade cabinet, and bringing the events of fight fighters to a screeching halt. Alternatively, Giffany did plan to download Soos' brain into Romance Academy 7, so perhaps something similar happened to Dipper here. Or it's possible that in another timeline, the events of Fight Fighters unfolded mostly the same until Rumble hit Dipper with a different finishing move. One that didn't just fuck Dipper up, but actually put him in the grave. And since he was slain by a video game character, his soul respawned through a 16-bit iteration in the game. Now this Dipper is left with nothing but bitter emotion, waiting for someone to put in the cheat code that can set him free. Let's knock out two birds with one stone and tackle Shears Dipper and Amulet Mabel, as their variants that hail from the same episode. Shears Dipper is pretty straightforward. Mabel isn't able to save him from Gideon in time during the events of the Hand of the Rocks to Mabel, and as a result, Dipper gets stabbed in the back by Shears, leaving Mabel all alone. Mabel gets sent right back home. Stan has a falling out with Dipper and Mabel's parents at the very least. Gideon wins, eventually attains Journal number 3, and ends up taking over the town, as the twins are no longer there to stop him. Amulet Mabel is a much more interesting story. You could get a lot of Hanksy fanfics out of this setup. Amulet Mabel is a Mabel who fails to save Dipper and Gideon with Gideon's amulet, causing the two to plummet to their death. Overwhelmed with guilt and struggling to cope with her brother's demise, Mabel keeps the amulet and runs away into the woods, mastering her newfound magical ability to dive deep into the supernatural weirdness of Gravity Falls, hoping to find a way to bring her brother back to life, or find a reality where he's still alive. Mabel with a dash of Raven or Scarlet Witch. You dig the vision? Imagine the rabbit hole that could send Mabel down, learning about Bill Cipher and the Zodiac, trying to prevent Weirdmageddon from happening, as she knows that if her brother's dead, then the prophecy is impossible to fulfill, and all the while she's haunted by the ghost of Gideon. Like, his actual ghost. You know his ass ain't gonna rest easy. Next we have a variant that I overlooked in my original video, Dipper Clone number 2. Better known as Tyrone, the clone that Dipper arguably got the closest to, even if natural selection played a big part in that. However, I don't think this is Tyrone in the illustration. I actually think that this is this universe's Dipper. Yeah, play the dramatic music. This is kinda crazy. Tyrone originally was the last clone standing in Double Dipper, aside from Dipper clones 3 and 4, who ran off into the woods. Well, actually, according to Journal 3 lore, they came back to the party, hid in Dipper's closet, and then ran into the woods after they were busted. What if instead of calling a truce, Tyrone in this timeline pulled an old switcheroo, imprisoning Dipper while he assumes his life, forcing Dipper into the role of clone number 2. Maybe clones 3 and 4 are keeping watch of this Dipper in the woods. Either way, he's not happy having his precious summer memories stolen from him. Of course, there's also the possibility that Tyrone took over his life and just murdered him. Tyrone spending his days avoiding liquids at all costs. Submarine Dipper is a variant where my thoughts haven't really changed all too much. This is a timeline where Dipper, Mabel, and the gang all got eaten by the submarine trickster like Gordy, but they weren't freed in time to escape digestion. Or, if the submarine trickster doesn't digest people, they could just be slowly rotting inside his body, surviving off candy but having no water to keep themselves hydrated. I guess you could say it's a rather sweet death. Oh, brother. Well, I thought it was funny. No, I didn't. Right below Summerwing Dipper, we have a Mabel variant that I wasn't able to identify in my original video, but now I know for a fact is likely a Mabel who died or lost her Dipper during the events of the Legend of the Gobblewonker, their second summer adventure. Revisiting this episode, odds are the twins were killed during the Gobblewonker chase. Like, it really is luck that anyone would survive a crash like this. The power of the Toon Force was absolutely on their side here, but clearly it wasn't in every universe. Since McGucket was the one piloting this mechanical beast, odds are he'd be sent to prison for not only the Gobblewonker, but causing the deaths of Dipper, Mabel, and Soos. And if McGucket goes to jail, the Society of the Blind Eye is never defeated. Ford may never come out of the portal, and the two never have their reconciliation. Which means this is probably a timeline where Gideon or Bill wins. Man, this is a dark video, huh? Zombie Mabel and Zombie Dipper are two more straightforward stories. They're just really heartbreaking. It's become a pretty popular idea that these undead twins are a result of Stan failing to save them in Karaoke, and I completely agree. Mostly because it would be a huge gut punch. Not only would Stan carry immense guilt for losing more family members in a situation where he feels as if he wasn't fast enough, but Dipper's final moments would have been the lad blaming himself for getting everyone wrapped up in his quest for answers.
I wanted answers so bad I put everyone in danger. Now we're toast, it's all my fault, and no one can save us!
This would also mean that the invisible ink in the journals was likely never discovered, so no one would have learned that a 3-part harmony is the key to defeating the zombies, and no one would have discovered the cure to reversing zombification. Odds are the entire town became zombies, either leading to a worldwide apocalypse, or Gravity Falls getting blown up to smithereens by the government, neutralizing the zombie outbreak before it gets too out of control. Wow, again, this is not a happy video. Let's try to lighten the mood with Smile Dip Mabel. I mean, I don't really have anything to add from the first time I talked about this. Mabel got lost in the Smile Dip sauce, and she never came down from that high. If she didn't die from a sugar-induced overdose, then she might just be tripping for the rest of the summer. Her warped perception of reality leaving her prone to danger. Bill doesn't even need to make Mabel land anymore. Time Displaced Dipper is an interesting one, because he could be a result of either the Time Traveler's pig or Blendon's game. Maybe this Dipper and Mabel got killed while slingshotting themselves through time, or maybe the tape ended up malfunctioning during one of their time travel adventures, and Dipper's trapped in this purgatory-like state, unable to stabilize himself in this reality. Now things really get weird as we shed light on a fan favorite, Dipper, and by proxy, Dipper's lost soul. We can safely assume this is a timeline that branches off from the events of Sock Opera, but after being duped by Bill Cipher, Dipper is never able to recover his body. While it's completely possible that there's a world out there where Mabel failed to stop Bill, and the Dream Demon kept Dipper's body for the long haul, leaving Dipper as a lost soul for the rest of his days, we can't ignore the morbid alternative provided in Journal 3, where Bill planned to jump off the water tower in Dipper's body, killing Dipper in the process. And since Bill can possess corpses, who's to say he couldn't get some more mileage out of Pine Tree? But I think there's a third path worth tossing out there. What if Bill lured Dipper into a dynamic that's identical to the one he had with Ford, where he's able to move in and out of Dipper's body whenever he pleases, striking this deal around the events of Sock Opera like before, so he just has to string Dipper along for a couple of weeks as Stan is on the verge of restarting the portal. By the time Ford meets Dipper, Dipper, it's already too late. Bill's 2 steps ahead, and as soon as Ford shows Dipper that rift, it's Weirdmageddon time. Dipper and Board aren't the only Bill-possessed pines out there in the multiverse, as we evidently have a universe where Mabel, or Babel, exists. Bill learned from trying to infiltrate Mabel's mind that she was desperate to make summer last forever, so perhaps there was a timeline where he reached out to her without possessing Blended, tricking her into making a deal so he can take control of her body and
Destroy the rift.
Maybe Bill ensnares Mabel in an illusion, like he did with Dipper, making it seem like the laptop was counting down, when in reality, nothing was happening to it whatsoever. What if he leads Mabel to believe that Dipper is on death's door, on the verge of passing in his sleep, forcing Mabel to strike a deal with him, as she believes it's the only way to ensure that Dipper is saved as fast as possible. Only for Mabel to discover that Dipper's actually fine, but it's far too late. Bill's already in control of her body. Maybe Bill strikes a deal with Mabel around the events of sock opera instead of Dipper, still deceiving Mabel by asking for a puppet, making his move once the portal restarts, given how instrumental Mabel was to that moment. It makes the most sense to me, given that sock opera was what cemented Bill as a huge threat in the eyes of Dipper and Mabel. But who knows? Maybe there's another moment that's perfect for Cypher to swoop in. Feel free to spitball in the comments. Northwest Dipper is another one where we can be quick to the point. Pacifica never committed to her change of heart and never opened the gates of the Northwest Mansion. Instead, she let the fear of her parents outweigh all sense of reason, keeping everyone at the party petrified, and odds are, she dies in that mansion with her parents. A lack of action can have consequences too. Tiny, Dipper, and Mabel. Gideon shrank them and they were never able to return back to normal. Pretty easy. Maybe they ended up getting stopped and killed while they were tiny. Maybe they ended up turning the tables on Gideon and killed him, but they're still the size of Smurfs. Either way, they look deranged. We have a hand that has to be Dipper or Mabel encased in amber or tree sap, meaning they lost big time during the events of The Land Before Swine. An episode that revealed Gravity Falls is secretly home to a ton of dinosaurs who are frozen in suspended animation. The tree sap keeping them in this state has begun to melt and is slowly freeing all the dinos. I just think the twins weren't lucky in this timeline and ended up getting trapped in some of this sap, but considering they're a fraction of the size of these dinosaurs, I imagine they'd either be preserved in this amber or are presumed to be dead. But hey, President Tremblay survived being encased in peanut brittle, so running with that logic, they should be fine. But I imagine if only one twin got trapped, then the other became fixated on saving them, which runs its own risk, and that could motivate them to find a universe where they're alive and well. It's unsettling to think of a timeline where Dipper or Mabel are like full-blown adults, and they're still trying to rescue their 12-year-old sibling from suspended animation, desperate to return to their childhood. I'm gonna derail for a second and run through some of the undocumented universes that aren't pictured in this spread, but more than likely exist if we're taking Bill's claim seriously. Lightning round! There's definitely a timeline where the twins don't survive the car crash and not what he seems. Dipper and Ford could have been killed by the Impossibeast, losing the game in Dungeons, and more dungeons. There's a timeline where Stan fails to save the twins, and they're blown up by Gideon in the Stanchurian Candidate. There's probably a timeline where Mabel and her friends are killed by the unicorns in the last Mabelcorn, losing the brawl. The kids fail to save Stan and get killed by Darlene in Roadside Attraction. Love hurts. Dipper touches the adhesive and has all of his orifices sewed up, or he gets killed during the prison droid chase in Dipper and Mabel vs. the Future. And finally, Dipper gets killed in the Mad Max-esque car chase during Weirdmageddon. Yeah, sorry this video was a bummer, but I'm having fun. Last but not least, we have petrified Dipper and Mabel, which I originally speculated could have happened at any point during Weirdmageddon, but a more popular idea is that it happened during the climax of the episode, right before Stan and Ford tricked Bill, the moment Bill captures Dipper and Mabel and threatens to kill one of them.
Eeny, meeny, miny, you!
What if the you and the eeny meeny miny you was actually both of the twins? Bill giving Ford the finger for turning him down by transforming his niece and nephews into statues. Perhaps this would have broken Ford, and he finally caves, only for Bill to destroy the statues instead of turning Dipper and Mabel back to normal. And there you have it. Every timeline where Dipper and Mabel either lost a battle or their lives. Do you agree with these scenarios, or do you envision something a little different? Let us know in the comments down below, and keep the conversation going over on Instagram and Twitter at OpticFox and at Roundtable Vids.
Why did you do it? Why did you do it?
Gravity Falls fans now have a season's worth of new lore to dig into, thanks to the Book of Bill and thisisnotawebsite.com. The new Gravity Falls website tied to the Book of Bill, which has been fixed by Soos and is finally working in its intended state, unleashing an ARG that's ensnared Gravity Falls fans all over the world in absolute madness. This website is nuts, giving us the promised lost files, which are a mix of what seems like bonus pages from the Book of Bill, a ton of goofs like the full version of Dipper-Seeking Disco Girl, and cameos from legends such as Matt Pat, Charlie Day, and Weird Al Yankovic.
Hello, Internet! This time, you're on your own. But, hold on, if I'm here, then does that canonically make me a character in the Gravity Falls universe? No, and I'm wearing yellow! Oh god, what is going on right now? Am I a part of the show?
We still have a lot to unpack from this book and now this website, but what I've been itching to talk about above all else is the revelation of Bill Cipher's parents, Euclid and Scalene Cipher, the two most important people in Bill's life, whose memory now haunts him as he's forced to atone for the blood on his hands in the Theraprism. I'm gonna give you the 411 on everything you need to know about his parents, his relationship with them, and their untimely demise at their son's hands. So the story of Bill's parents isn't just something that Alex Hirsch cooked up for the book. He actually first teased Cipher's relationship with his parents nearly a decade ago at New York Comic-Con 2015, during the final Gravity Falls panel prior to the show's ending, promoting the jaw-dropping episode Dipper and Mabel vs. the Future. Oh god, I'm old now! Towards the end of the panel during Q&A, a fan asked Hirsch if Bill had a brother, which I imagine had to deal with the old Tad Strange theory, that Tad Strange was another dream demon related to Bill after Cecil Baldwin added the role to his resume, and Bill caught the character at Square in a legendary AMA. I'm getting off track, the memories are just flooding in. Anyways, when asked if Bill had a brother, Hirsch had this to say.
Let me put it this way. If you think Uncle Stan's relationship with his family is bad, it's worse. That's all I can say about that.
Coupled with Bill claiming that he doesn't have a family anymore in the Reddit AMA, there's some pretty obvious implications that Bill Cipher murdered his family for reasons unknown, something that was confirmed in the series finale, Weirdmageddon 3 Take Back the Falls, when Bill reveals to the audience that he destroyed his home, the second dimension, now known as Euclydia. Feeling as if his dimension was limited by their literal perspective, bound by rules that only held them all back, Cipher's solution was setting it all ablaze. We don't get any further elaboration on this in the show itself, but Journal 3 did give us a bit more insight, as Jezebram, aka the Oracle, stated that Bill's thirst for power caused him to destroy his home dimension, including his parents and everyone else he'd ever known. And if you don't know who the Oracle is, read Journal 3, or check out my video about Forge 30 Years in the Nightmare Realm. Now, that's all we really knew about Bill's homeworld until the release of the Book of Bill, which gave us a lot more perspective on Bill's upbringing and the nightmarish Ukian Massacre. Now, I want this video to focus mainly on Bill's parents. We'll save major details on the Ukian Massacre, as it'll be its own video coming out later this week. But the most important thing to know is, Bill was born with a rare mutation, which is implied to be his eye, and this mutation enabled him to see the third dimension. If you head to thisisnotawebsite.com and enter Just Fit In on the terminal, you'll get a video of an old school commercial for the board game, Perfection, where you push down different shaped pieces into their corresponding holes before time runs out. Notably, this ad features a happy family playing the game at the table. I think everything about this embodies Bill's life in Euclydia. Bill describes it as everyone chaotically bumping into each other, as there's no up and presumably no down. So it would kinda just look like a bunch of shapes lined up in a row, like Perfection. But the happy family? That definitely feels as if it's meant to represent the Ciphers, how they were all happy together. And because of Bill's actions, that image of a happy family is something he longs for, but will never have again. I guess that's why he really had it out for the Pines. The website's archive of this old commercial is actually edited and quickly flashes a hexahue cipher, aka a color cipher, which when decoded gives us a bedtime lullaby, presumably sung by Bill's mom. Rock-a-bye Billy, please don't you cry. It's not your fault you have that strange eye. Stay safe with mommy, you'll never fall, and we'll always love you, sharp edges and all. Thank you. I might play a coffee shop soon. Contrary to his claims in the book that he was beloved and celebrated by all on Euclydia, this lullaby implies that Bill might have actually been picked on by all the other shapes for his one eye. Or maybe there's something about his eye that sticks out like a sore thumb from everyone else's one eye. It's not really clear. This should ring a bell though, as getting picked on for a genetic mutation is the exact kind of thing that Ford went through in his childhood, which adds a new layer to why Bill was so drawn to him. He saw himself in Ford as they both shared a curiosity for their worlds and both had physical attributes that made them feel isolated from their peers. They were kindred spirits, and they both found comfort in their families. Ford getting reassurance from Stanley, and Bill getting reassurance from his mother, Scalene. We'll get into where their names come from in a sec, don't you worry. Bill's parents truly love their son unconditionally, which makes their untimely demise at his hands all the more tragic. This is where thisisnotawebsite.com comes in to really wreck our emotions with a slew of heartbreaking Easter eggs and revelations. Not too long ago, when the site was hidden behind Soos in a countdown, a message was hidden in plain sight, as the paper background featured 2 coffee stains that actually had Morse code. Yeah, everything's a clue. You gotta be a crazy motherfucker to be a Gravity Falls fan. Salute to everyone who decoded these while I was on Fairly Odd duty. The coffee stain's hidden message reads, "His dimension now deceased. Scalene and Euclid, rest in peace." I already gave it away, but these are the names of Bill's parents. Scalene, the mom, and Euclid, the dad. Typing their names into the terminal will give you life forms not found, just to rub some extra salt in the wound. Now, Euclid sharing his name with their dimension and race of people makes me wonder if that was just a common name in their homeworld, or if the Cypher family was actually royalty, with Bill's dad sharing the esteemed name. Kinda like how in Dragon Ball, Vegeta's dad is named King Vegeta, ruler of the planet Vegeta, and apparently our Vegeta is Vegeta the 4th. Bro's entire lineage is named after a seasoning. But if this is the case, then maybe Bill wasn't totally lying about being celebrated on his homeworld, born into praise and adoration because he was royalty, which would make the fact that he destroyed their entire civilization even darker in my opinion. Speaking of dark, typing Vallis Cineris into the terminal, which is Latin for Valley of Ashes, produces a creepy video of baby Bill being held by Scalene and Euclid, though the bodies of the 2 parents are silhouetted out, replaced with static. All the while, a creepy robotic voice repeats,
Why did you do it?
reinforcing Bill's guilt for slaughtering his people and especially his family, something that was evidently an avoidable tragedy. Baby Bill is wearing a colorful propeller hat and a blue tie, which is worth pointing out as Euclid's top hat is identical to adult Bill's, probably because it might be his. That's right, it's now believed to be a momentum of his dead father, and for all we know, his black bow tie might have been inherited from his mom. Now, I've seen some speculation that a Euclidean's hat might just be a part of their anatomy, and Bill's headwear naturally evolved from a propeller to a top hat, since we see its fleshy insides in Weirdmageddon Part 1. But you have to remember that by that point, Bill Cipher's body transcended the Mindscape. He manifested a physical form as he entered our reality. We literally saw his body grow a layer of flesh. So I'm in the camp of people who believe that the top hat only became a part of his body after Weirdmageddon started, and that the hat did originally belong to Euclid. Finally, if you type well-being into the terminal, you'll get blurbs from Bill's Theraprism file. You know, the purgatory rehab facility the Axolotl has him currently locked up in until he confronts his issues and betters himself. Yeah, good luck with that. One of these blurbs reads, Art Therapy Notes. All he draws are red and blue triangles. Red and blue presumably being the colors of Scalene and Euclid, although it's left up to the imagination who is what color. But it does make me wonder if that's why Bill turns red whenever he gets angry or transforms into his monstrous pyramid form. It's something genetic that he picked up from his folks. Drawing red and blue triangles over and over reaffirms that Bill is messed up over killing his parents. They're constantly on his mind, and he knows he can't do anything to bring them back. There's actually a part in the book of Bill where we learn that Bill got blasted after his falling out with Ford. He didn't handle it as well as the last Mabel corn would lead you to believe. And while he was intoxicated, he started crying out for Scalene, desperately trying to find his mom, exclaiming claiming that he'll be home from school soon. Sadly, instead of finding his mom, all Bill finds is himself in intergalactic police custody. He's been racked with the guilt of killing his parents for billions of years, but desperately tried to run from his feelings, throwing himself into plans for world domination and reducing another planet to ashes. But that very destructive coping mechanism blew up in his face big time with a classic Stanley Pines right hook. Reality quite literally hit him in the face, and now there's no more running, no more tricks, no more deals. If he wants to reincarnate, he has to confront what he's done, something he may never be able to do. And there you have it, everything we know about Bill's parents, Scalene and Euclid Cipher. All of this seems like it could be teasing another Gravity Falls project, so maybe if we get another book or even animated content, we'll get a proper look at them. Despite wrapping up many mysteries in the back half of Season 2, the series finale of Gravity Falls dropped a major bombshell that only raised more questions. The revelation that Bill Cipher destroyed his home dimension and everyone in it, leaving him as the sole survivor. Something he regards as an act of liberation. But why? The details were kept under wraps for the next 8 years until the release of the Book of Bill. Thanks to the book and the bonus content accompanying it, we've learned so much more about Bill's home dimension and its untimely demise at Bill's hands. Did Cipher intend to wipe his people off the map? Was it a freak accident? Or is the truth somewhere in the middle? We're going to run through everything we know about Euclydia, speculate a bit on Bill's father Euclid, and try to fill in the gaps of the infamous Ukian Massacre. You thought Bill Cipher was evil before? Well, prepare to see him in a whole new light as we unpack his inner darkness. First things first, what was Euclydia? Well, thought to be inspired by the book Flatland, A Romance of Many Dimensions, Bill describes it as a world that our 3D minds are incapable of processing, as it's limited to only 2 dimensions. Completely flat, with its inhabitants constantly bumping around into each other, which I imagine looked like a more chaotic version of the bouncing DVD screensaver. Or, as I said in my video on Scalene and Euclid Cipher, it could have looked like the game Perfection, which is featured on thisisnotawebsite.com. Bill claims the only way we could perceive this dimension is by chugging expired milk while looking at a kaleidoscope, which is actually very helpful in painting a picture, as traditional kaleidoscopes are limited to 2-dimensional images. So take something like this and add a bunch of shapes? Judging by Bill's baby photo and the existence of things like oxygen, I imagine that despite being flat, Euclydia might not have been all that different from Earth. They had nature and civilization and, I don't know, bottomless mimosas. Which explains why Bill is so personable compared to the other oddities the Pines encountered. His life experience was oddly comparable to that of a human's. The inhabitants of Euclydia were known as Euclidians, which were all 2-dimensional shapes like Bill, with limbs, fancy hats, and all. Also, their blood is TV static, which means Bill's current cracked state is actually exposing his equivalent of internal organs. His actual organs, not the physical form he had on Earth, where he generated layers of bone and tissue, both being pretty disturbing in their own way. The most notable thing about Euclidians, however, is that since they couldn't perceive the 3rd dimension, they also couldn't see up, only seeing from the left to the right, and it's speculated that because of this, their eyes are on the sides of their bodies like in Flatland. The only Euclidean who could see beyond the 2nd dimension was the one and only Bill Cipher, as he was born with a mutation that allowed him to perceive the 3rd dimension. This mutation is speculated to be the placement of his eye, as it's in the center of his face instead of on his side. However, I'd argue that Bill's ability to perceive the 3rd dimension wasn't just a one-off mutation, but also a major step of evolution for the Euclidean race. We know from the Theraprism's art therapy notes that Euclid and Scalene were red and blue triangles, as those are the only 2 things that Bill will draw. Red and blue, or cyan, being the 2 colors used for Anaglyph 3D. You know, like 3D glasses. Personally, I find it hard to believe that this is a coincidence, especially as 3D glasses are one of Bill's listed phobias, which might also indicate that some Euclideans may have specific abilities depending on their color. But also, we don't know if Bill was the only yellow Euclidean. Red, blue, and yellow are the 3 primary colors, which might indicate that Bill, Scalene, and Euclid are of high status on Euclydia, as I believe the Cipher family was actually royalty, the rulers of this dimension, wielding unfathomable power. We know that Bill's mutation isn't the only standout thing about him. Dude is absolutely cracked when it comes to his powers. And neither the book nor the series itself gives us an idea if these powers are something Bill acquired or something outside of Euclydia, or if he inherited them from his parents. But I'd wager that it might be the latter, given his father's name. After my video on Bill's parents, where I suggested that Euclid sharing the name of the dimension and its inhabitants may allude to him being a king, like how King Vegeta in Dragon Ball is the ruler of planet Vegeta and the Saiyans, I had a ton of people bring to my attention that Euclid is also the name of the Greek mathematician, the father of geometry, who established the foundation of geometry in a mathematical system that's now referred to as Euclidean geometry. Sharing the name of geometry's real-life creator and having a son with some truly nightmarish feats definitely makes me think that Euclid himself was a big deal. But if Euclid was the king and Bill was the prince, then the fact that Bill killed everyone is all the more appalling. But why did Bill do it? Well, I believe it's a mix of what he tells us in the Book of Bill and resentment for the world around him. Bill claims that he was adored by the masses since the day he was born, and while that would make sense if he was royalty, I think it's also just as likely that Bill was looked down upon by other Euclideans for both his mutation and his gift. Bill is drawn to other anomalies and, in his own words, freaks, those who are outcasts in their homeworld. You know, like Ford and his 6 fingers. And I think that's because Bill himself was actually an outcast. His parents sung a lullaby comforting him for sporting a strange eye, which infers that this was something he was insecure about. And I can imagine that, like Ford, Bill was teased for his deformity.
Haha, your eyes in the center of your face.
Not only that, but if he's constantly yapping about a third dimension that no one else can see, he's gonna sound a little cuckoo. You know, like how the early episodes of the show would have Dipper fixated on the supernatural, and he'd be trying to prove himself to the adults around him, only to get shut down and ridiculed, including by people like Stan, who knew Dipper was telling the truth about everything the entire time. I think that potential ridicule for his claims of a third dimension and his mutated eye really got under Bill's skin. It's why he insists that he doesn't need anyone, even though most of his schemes does require at least one other person shaking his hand. And it's why he said everyone in Euclydia had flat minds and flat dreams. He's clearly bitter about them, despite claiming that everyone loved him. Euclideans were content in the second dimension and had no desire to see what lied ahead. They didn't even believe something else could be out there. They couldn't look up and see the stars. So, Bill devised a plan to liberate his home dimension, believing everyone would be grateful for it.
It was time to put on a show. I came up with a plan to show everyone what they were missing. Their screams getting louder and louder as I... So much blood! So much! Mandible! My hands shaking as I realized I could never undo the... Was the last one breathing? Episodes of Family Matter! Until there was no one left but me, covered in blood, alone in the universe. Huh, that's weird. For some reason, whenever I try to talk about that day, there's this loud buzzing in my ears and I black out for 30 seconds. Well, we can come back to it. The important thing is, I'd freed myself from my suffocating world and freed everyone else too. And everyone loved me for it, and everyone was fine. And that's all there is to say about that. The new dimension I escaped to had a job vacancy for the role of Galactic Overlord. I humbly obliged.
So clearly, Bill's lying when he says that he freed everyone and that they loved it and everyone was fine. In reality, whatever he did killed every single Euclidean in his dimension, including his parents. Fleeing to the Nightmare Realm in the aftermath of this massacre, putting his best foot forward to bury the past from here on out, always making a conscious effort to break any and all rules after feeling restricted by the loss of his homeworld. Now, although Bill blocked out the details of this fateful day, and it's purposely left ambiguous on if Bill intended on killing everyone or if it was a mistake, additional context clues from thisisnotawebsite.com leads me to believe that it was a little bit of both. Entering NAITSUAF into the terminal will bring up a soul contract with Bill. Signing it will change the color of the candle's flame from orange to blue, which in the context of Gravity Falls, we recognize as the color of Bill's fire. After this shift in hue, hitting the computer knob will play a backwards message from the same text-to-speech voice that appears when you type in Valles Generis, aka Valley of Ashes. But this time, instead of someone asking, "Why did you do it?" the audio clips say, If Bill has one signature ability, it's definitely his pyrokinesis. Fire always pops up when he strikes a deal. It pops up when he gets mad. He burned the journals. He set all of Gravity Falls ablaze when he started Weirdmageddon. Dude loves fire! And judging by that backwards message, he somehow lit the whole sky on fire in an attempt to show everyone the third dimension. It seems like Bill was literally trying to break the sky with his pyrokinesis, as if blasting full force would cause it to shatter and somehow cause the world to expand into 3 dimensions. But instead, his attack set the atmosphere ablaze, causing everything to burst into flames, if not igniting one big explosion. However, I don't think this would explain why Bill is the only survivor. Like, you're telling me no one else evaded the flames and tried to escape? Not to mention, this whole story leaves out one pretty big and consistent piece of his character: his temper. We know that when Bill is agitated, he's quick to hit him with the old tweak and transform, going on an absolute rampage until he's either defeated, stalled, or runs out of steam. So although it's too vague to say this was 100% the case, I could totally see Bill freaking out when everything's catching on fire, and instead of being met with validation and praise, he just sees everyone screaming at the top of their lungs as they try to avoid the flames of disaster. Seeing his plans go horribly wrong and being powerless to stop the fire, Bill probably recognized that his life was over and he'd be severely punished for his actions. Unless he kills everyone. So he snapped and decided to finish the job started by his arson, assuming his grotesque pyramid form and slaughtering every Euclidean in sight to avoid punishment. Even his own parents, who were probably his one ticket out of life in prison if he didn't go off the deep end. I know this sounds crazy, but one of the few words you can make out on this page seems to read, "nice to me." Although it could potentially say something like, "nice to meet you," but nice to me gives me the vibes of when someone's just taken out everyone in their path. But maybe they'll spare the one person who was always nice to them. If Bill was bullied for his eye and claims of a third dimension, then I'd totally buy that he'd consider sparing one of the few peers who didn't make fun of his appearance or beliefs, only to still go through with it because fuck it, no survivors. All of this was way too much for him to process, though. He couldn't come to terms with the blood on his hands, the lives he took both by accident and with intent. So he went on the lam and laid low in the Nightmare Realm, having the occasional run-in with Time Baby, which is a saga that's worth its own video, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on that one. Although he acts like he's above attachments and never regrets any of his actions, the Book of Bill makes it very obvious that Bill despises himself for eradicating his homeworld and is still holding on to what remains of his old life. It's not only implied that he tried to strike a deal with Time Baby in order to go back to the past and stop himself from destroying Euclydia, but it's revealed that he's in possession of the dimension's last atoms. One of the Lost Journal 3 pages included in the book features an instance where Ford caught one of Stan's scams on TV. A voice from the past. "I was adjusting my TV antenna for weather reports, looking for ideal conditions for Fiddleford's first portal test, and spat out my coffee when I saw this. My brother hawking scams under the name Panley Steins. I had half a mind to call that number just to pretend to be the police, and maybe scare Stanley straight for once. There is something so galling about seeing your own face committing crimes on your own TV. When my muse saw me break out my stress ball, I decided it was finally time to vent about Stanley."
How about that? You've got an inferior clone. Why didn't you just eat him in the womb? Think of how powerful you'd be.
Yeah, this guy definitely killed everyone. You can't just eat your own twin, Bill.
You would be surprised what you can eat.
Yeah, he definitely ate people.
I say sure. Call him if you want him to start mooching off you again. Me, I went no contact with my home dimension, and I don't regret it. All they did was hold me back and sabotage my talents. Can you imagine?
More than you know. But do you ever wonder if maybe things could have been different?
Take it from a guy who tried. You can't undo the past, unless you want to thaw a giant baby out of a glacier.
Come again?
Figure of speech. It means waste your time.
I guess you can never really go home again, can you?
I sure can't. My dimension was entirely burned out of existence. Want to see the only thing left of it?
Cypher removed his hat and plucked out a single speck of dust from within. The last atoms of a demolished reality. I was dumbfounded. What? Your entire home dimension? Destroyed? How? By what? Bill looked distant. More distant than I'd ever seen him.
By a monster.
That's unimaginable. Did you ever track this beast for revenge? I could help you. I could hunt it down. He laughed joylessly.
Sixer, it would eat you alive.
Yeah, Ford might have destroyed those atoms when he fumbled his shot on Bill in Weirdmageddon Part 1. While it's still ambiguous, I do think this dialogue leads into the idea that the destruction of Euclydia wasn't just an accident, especially with Bill saying that the monster would eat Ford alive, implying that he would attack Ford should he ever find out about Bill's secret and try to avenge the Euclidean race. Bill's story, like many in Gravity Falls, feels like a cautionary tale of self-sabotage. What happens when you push those around you away while also being beaten down by the world around you? What happens when your pride and ego gets the better of you as you desperately try to seek validation, even if it runs the risk of hurting those around you? Bill rolled the dice, and unfortunately, it blew up in his face. And instead of owning up to his mistakes and atoning for his past, he doubles down and relishes in being a monster, even if it makes him sick to his stomach deep down. He'd rather become his worst nightmare instead of being vulnerable and taking accountability for his actions. And look where that got him! Stuck in rehab! But there you have it, everything we know about the Ukian Massacre. What do you think really happened? Do you think Bill will ever come to terms with the truth? Let me know in the comments down below. Animation tends to feature memorable antagonists that leave a long-lasting impression on our narrative taste that molds greater expectations when consuming media. Villains can be brilliant, menacing, ruthless, but also charming, amusing, and flat out hilarious. And of course, villains can be batshit insane. And then there's Bill Cipher, who's all of the aforementioned, while also being a floating triangle. Bill Cipher is without a doubt one of my favorite villains in animation. Has our growing backlog of content on him not give that away? Something that causes this man to still give me chills for years after the conclusion of Gravity Falls is thinking about everything that went on off screen. Bill Cipher is a con man, someone who knows how to get what he wants, no matter how long the con itself is, embarking on a scheme that spanned thousands, if not trillions of years. And even though he ultimately was defeated, there was a small window of time, the event referred to as Weirdmageddon, where Bill won. So today, I want to go through this plan, the origins and timeline of Bill Cipher, what we saw in and out of episodes in order, how Bill went from just another flat shape in the second dimension to the demon who unleashed an apocalypse. I'm going to show the world just how clever Bill manages to be, and maybe you'll even walk away with a greater appreciation for him. With all that said, let's dive in. Cipher's story begins a very long time ago in the second dimension, a home he greatly detested, describing it as flat minds in a flat world with flat dreams. And according to an interview with Entertainment Weekly back in 2015, Alex Hirsch went as far as to say, if you think Stan's relationship with his family is bad, Bill's is worse. And in his own Reddit AMA, when questioned on if he has a family, Bill simply responded, not anymore. We can infer that the inhabitants of the second dimension tend to be a little bit vanilla. The dimension as a whole was just boring. Not much was going on. No one really had any big aspirations. No one was down to get weird and party. Although not much is known about Bill's species, I assume his array of abilities are just native, so it probably aggravated him to no end that those surrounded by him also had access to limitless knowledge, because he simply did nothing with that knowledge. They were stick in the muds. He didn't see eye to eye with anyone there because they were the exact opposite of him. So how did Bill cope with the situation? Obviously, he would do what any rational person would do and use his fire abilities to burn down his dimension, incinerating it to his last molecule, and committing genocide upon his entire species, including his family. Wait, what? Yeah, that's pretty messed up. Bill appears to have an affinity towards fire. Those blue flames are absolutely his go-to throughout the series. Like, if you ever wanted to know Bill's middle name, it's Arson. Although this was a completely psychotic act, we know through the almighty axolotl that Bill wasn't completely content with this decision. But we can't disrupt the timeline. So, staying on track, after being fresh out of a home dimension, Bill was finally free, which would lead him to conquer the Nightmare Realm, an intergalactic galactic wasteland between dimensions that houses some of the most despicable criminals throughout the multiverse. Much to Bill's liking, it lacks any rules. However, it's unfortunate that that also applies scientifically, as a lack of physics caused the Nightmare Realm to collapse in on itself. Conquering the Nightmare Realm was fine, but at the end of the day, Bill felt as if he traded in one prison for another. He wanted to spread his liberation of rules and order across all of existence. However, during this reign, Bill learned of a prophecy, one that was just music to his ears. The prophecy spoke of a day where Bill would successfully merge the Nightmare Realm with the third dimension, conquering the Earth, and shortly after, the entire solar system. The event prophesied in question would be referred to as Weirdmageddon. But in order to achieve Weirdmageddon, Bill needed to figure out a way to manifest himself inside that reality. Being a dream demon and all, he lacks a proper physical form that would allow him to cross over into the third dimension. But he's still able to wander into the minds of others, and that includes possession. So if he pulls a few strings, in theory, he'd be able to manipulate a human being into forging a gateway between Earth and the Nightmare Realm, properly adopting the title of Bill Cipher, as his true identity would apparently evaporate one with an expression of horror and ecstasy on their face. Bill tried to get in with the ancient Egyptians, who attempted to create a portal for Bill, but alas, it only functioned for 10 minutes, unleashing a jackal-headed man from the Nightmare Realm, Anubis. Furious, Bill tormented the Egyptians with nightmares, and in an attempt to appease him, the Egyptians erected giant stone tributes in Bill's image. But the arms and top hats broke off and eroded over time, becoming the pyramids we know today. But Bill didn't give up, and set his sights on the natives of a place with unusual paranormal activity, Gravity Falls. Right off the bat, Bill knew exactly what kind of person he would target in order to achieve Weirdmageddon. Those who had questions that they felt needed to be answered. Those who were intelligent, much more capable than the rest, but someone just dumb enough to con into an apocalypse. One of Bill's earliest examples actually being a shaman named MODOK. Through the invisible link and codes found in Journal 3, we can decipher what went down between Bill and MODOK the Wise. As Bill's first pawn in what would become Gravity Falls, MODOK was instructed to erect an interdimensional gateway between the Nightmare Realm and Earth. Although this portal was made out of wood, and with MODOK being a shaman and all, I assume this portal would have been powered through spells and other forms of magic. MODOK was also responsible for inscribing the incantation that brought Bill into Ford's life. Although it's unknown, but in my opinion doubtful, if MODOK inscribed the Zodiac that would be used to vanquish Bill. And I say it's doubtful because when MODOK discovered that he was being used by Bill, learning of Cypher's prophecy, not only did he destroy the wooden portal, but he set himself ablaze, ending his life and any further possibility of Bill's manipulation. And yeah, as you guys probably already know from the main series, is that Bill's association with fire is made pretty clear. From here on out, we can assume that Bill rained havoc on the other natives of Gravity Falls, as at some point, they were provided with the information needed to create the Zodiac with 10 symbols that would be used to temporarily vanquish Bill. However, with the incantations left in the cave, Bill would not remain separated from Gravity Falls for long. Eventually, Gravity Falls would be populated by Quentin Tremblay and other pioneers, and in the meanwhile, Bill would have two significant encounters, as Bill would eventually cross paths with none other than George Washington, whom Bill aided by giving the secrets to defeat the British. I'm not even making this up. But when Washington's attempt at a steam-powered portal sunk into the swamp, Bill plagued him with nightmares so severe that Washington ground his teeth into dust in his sleep, having to compensate with wooden replacements. Hoping to satiate Bill's bloodlust, Washington added him onto the $1 bill. And let's really think about this. Every depiction of Bill is a gateway he can see through. Think of how many $1 bills exist. Yeah, Bill has eyes everywhere. Bill also helped Stanley Kubrick fake the moon landing. Bill was hoping Kubrick could convince NASA to build a portal, but when the proposal was rejected, Bill once again unleashed a plague of nightmares, which, in a twist of fate, actually ended up helping Kubrick's film career. And at some point in time, we know that Bill encountered Rick Sanchez, as one of Rick's vials found in Morty's Mind Blowers is labeled Bill C. Rick is probably the best person you could go to for a portal, until you realize he's a pretty big asshole. But Bill's own ball would not be rolling until the tale of two Stans begin to unfold. The curious mind that is Stanford Pines arriving in Gravity Falls, spending 6 years researching the town for its anomalies. However, after hitting a roadblock while researching the origins for all the anomalies in Gravity Falls, Ford decided to do a little bit of hiking, clear his mind, and maybe he'll find something new along the way. And find something new he did, stumbling upon the cave full of incantations, reciting them aloud, and allowing Bill Cipher to enter Ford's life. Encountering Stanford must have been like Christmas to Bill. Such a very intelligent and sharp mind, clouded by childhood trauma and insecurity. Tough luck with bullies, his own parents, and even his twin brother. Might as well be wearing a shirt that says emotional vulnerability. Introducing himself to Ford in a dream and impressing him with a display of limitless knowledge, Bill quickly had his new pawn. Revealing to Stanford that the supernatural occurrences in Gravity Falls is due to a rift between dimensions, Bill was able to get development on Ford's portal underway. However, things quickly grew complicated as Ford involved another partner, Fiddleford McGucket. Although McGucket was eager to provide Ford with help and make history along the way, being Ford's old college roommate, he was able to recognize what ideas felt off, what felt like Stanford, and what felt like someone else. Fiddleford was able to see what Stanford couldn't see, as Stanford spiraled further and further into an obsession, transforming his home into the Church of Cypher. Fiddleford kept his guard up, aware that something was off, unaware that Stanford's body was being possessed by a floating triangle. However, things came to a head on January 18th, 1982, the night where the interdimensional portal was finally ready for its first big test. However, after Fiddleford was tangled up into the rope and briefly sent through the portal himself, he was met with the horrifying image of Bill removing his exoskeleton in order to feast. After being recovered by Stanford, Fiddleford's mind was absolutely warped, speaking absolute nonsense before reciting a prophecy of his own. When gravity falls and Earth becomes sky, fear the beast with just one eye. Fiddleford promptly quit the project, straying off into his own adventure that would become the Society of the Blind Eye, which, yeah, we know how that turns out. But Stanford just lost another friend. He finally let someone in after so long, and he ended up driving him away in the name of science. Things finally began to click with Stanford, like for real this time. The loss of Fiddleford finally instilled enough doubt for Ford to confront Bill. However, Cypher has absolutely no fucks given, asserting to Stanford, yes, this portal is meant for something horrible, horribly fun. And with this, Ford learns of Bill's intentions with Weirdmageddon. Ford shut the project down and shut Bill out of his head, doing so with the installation of a metal plate inside his head. Of course, Ford will recruit his twin brother Stanley in an attempt to get Stanley to take Journal 1 and bury it as far as possible from Ford. This led to a fight, as Stan was furious to hear that his brother reached out to him for the first time in years, only to tell him, hey, get this thing and you as far away from me as possible. They fight, Ford mistakenly stumbles into the portal and traverses the Nightmare Realm alongside other interdimensional escapades for 30 long years. And much to Bill's dismay, not much progress was made over this 30 years. Why? Because no pawn was good enough. Although, Stan did open up Ford's house to the public, transforming it into the tourist attraction known as the Mystery Shack, which in turn exposed the citizens of Gravity Falls to Ford's lingering Bill Cipher imagery. This in itself kind of caused Bill to become a very quiet mascot, as he can be seen all over the town in seasons 1 and 2. Graffiti, arcade machines, currency, his influence was everywhere, and I would 100% pin this on the Mystery Shack. However, it's going to be tough for Bill to find a curious cat because of the Society of the Blind Eye, an organization whose entire purpose is erasing unpleasant or bad memories. When it comes to all the supernatural activity in Gravity Falls, the chance of someone questioning the things around them was slim because those memories can just be erased in an instant. Not to mention the effects of the Blind Eye's memory gun can really dumb someone down, so Bill's qualifications nominations for an ideal pawn was out the window until an outsider came into the mix and stuck around. Because keep in mind, although the Mystery Shack does attract tourists, they're not gonna hang around long enough for Bill to swoop in. Yet, the arrival of Dipper and Mabel Pines changed everything. Dipper was someone who questioned the unknown, who craved knowledge, and wanted to learn more about the world around him. And because of all the depictions of Bill around town, I'm sure he was well aware of Dipper and his arrival for a long time. However, he was hesitant to engage with Dipper due to his correlation with the Zodiac that could vanquish Bill. However, everyone would get a little push once Gideon Gleeful came into the mix. Equipped with Journal Number 2, Gideon summoned Bill Cipher in a mission to obtain the deed to the Mystery Shack, thus being able to take over. Bill, realizing that Gideon is clouded with vengeance and directly involved with the Pines family, made him the best pawn in 30 years where he can still weasel his way to the portal. Not to mention, I doubt Bill was only keeping tabs on Gravity Falls, but Earth and the human race in general. I don't believe that 30 years was just spent looking around Gravity Falls, but looking around everywhere for any kind of pawn. However, once the events of Dreamscaperers actually got into the mix, Bill was able to directly interact with Dipper, Mabel, and Soos, causing Bill to deduce that those involved in the Zodiac that could be responsible for his downfall, they're either kids or not the sharpest tool in the shed. Thus, they aren't people he should avoid, they're pawns he can control. Not to mention, being in Stan's mind probably gave him some very valuable information. Alas, the plans of Gideon fall through. Bill faces off against Dipper, Mabel, and Soos, almost loses, but it reminds everyone who's in control when it comes to the Mindscape. I imagine being in Stanley's mind is also how Bill got the information that Stan is still trying to activate the portal, trying to bring Ford back, and thus unknowingly allowing Bill to enter through the third dimension, should the portal actually be strong enough to connect directly with the Nightmare Realm. Because of this, Bill has to make sure that Dipper doesn't interfere, that the portal goes off without a hitch. So, after peeping around town, keeping his eye on Dipper, Bill makes himself known for the first time in Season 2 during the episode Sock Opera, turning Dipper's quest for answers against him, much like with MODOK, Ford, and Gideon, hijacking Dipper's body and destroying McGucket's laptop, which would have given away the identity of the author and thus causing a Pines family intervention, which in itself could have entertained the notion of the portal potentially being shut down, and thus screwing Bill out of his plans. After screwing around with Dipper and Mabel for a bit, Bill is ultimately outsmarted by Mabel as she pits Dipper's body against Bill, and Cypher teases that big things are coming, returning to the shadows. Of course, the portal does eventually go off, but it is still way too unstable and is only strong enough to bring back Ford. However, as a result of the portal activating, a new interdimensional rift was created, Bill's ticket to Weirdmageddon, and thus re-reach the climax of his plan. Aware of Ford's return and the interdimensional rift, Bill feels as if victory is already in his hands, after being summoned by an imprisoned Gideon Gleeful who just faced a crushing defeat at the hands of Dipper and Mabel. Bill's deal with Gideon occurred off screen, but we can't connect enough dots. Gideon wanted freedom, and in exchange, he would have to pledge allegiance to Bill, promising to become his servant once Weirdmageddon arrives. However, Bill makes one fatal mistake. He gets cocky. Bill mockingly visits Ford in his dreams. Although Ford's metal plate prevents possession, I guess dreams just aren't off limits. As Bill taunts Ford over his recent deal with Gideon, and how that sooner than later, Weirdmageddon will be here. This causes Ford to go absolutely supernova. Spilling his origin to Dipper, the two create a magical unicorn barrier around the Mystery Shack, preventing Bill from possessing anyone who enters those quarters. And generally, Dipper and Ford are on their toes, awaiting for Bill's next move. If Bill just kept his mouth shut, if he didn't pay that visit to Ford, things could have gone down a lot differently in Cypher's favor. But no, he had to be a prideful asshole. But remember what I said about Bill keeping an eye on the Pines family, and that any depiction of him serves as another gateway for him to see through? All of that gave him more options. In keeping an eye on Dipper and Mabel, he was able to find another pawn ripe for the taking. We know him. I don't know if everyone loves him, but it's local time-traveling screw-up Blendon. If you ever wonder what happened between Bill and Blendon, but you never got the answers, you never were able to pick up Journal 3, well, then I have the answers for you. You see, Blendon works for one of Bill's greatest adversaries, Time Baby. Blendon is also the butt of every joke. He's a punching bag for the Time Police. And after losing Globnar to Dipper and Mabel, the heckling towards Blendon doubled. Although he got his job back, he was still being teased and put down by coworkers. Time Baby himself called called him no friend in Blandon. And because Blandon time traveled back to Gravity Falls so often, Bill was able to successfully infiltrate his mind and wait for the right moment. Bill manifested inside Blandon's dreams, claiming that he could make sure Time Baby would never bother him again. Oh god. All Blandon had to do was shake Bill's hand. Under pressure and desperate for Time Baby's respect, Blandon accepted, becoming the perfect pawn for this particular job because, well, he kinda has infinite do-overs on account of time travel. Recognizing the cracks in Dipper and Mabel's relationship due to his previous observations of the two, the rest came pretty easy to Bill. Just sit back, relax, and wait for them to fall apart. Dipper and Mabel have their big fight, Mabel takes the wrong backpack with the rift inside, and Bill is able to time travel to her aid. Inside Blandon's body, Bill manipulates Mabel into an offer she can't refuse. A summer that will never end. She never has to grow up and things never have to change between her and her brother. Of course, it's all bullshit. Bill just needed to get his hands on the rift, and as soon as he does, he destroys it, unleashing Weirdmageddon. You guys know the rest from here. Bill unleashes Weirdmageddon. He's at the top of his game, ruling Gravity Falls with an iron fist, throwing a party that never ends. He kills Time Baby, so he delivered on his promise to Blandon, although Time Baby really deserves his own video. But after being caught in Gravity Falls' law of weirdest magnetism, I hate that term, I really wish they came up with something less goofy, Bill turns to Ford for help. Of course, Ford is all, nah man. Dipper and Mabel are able to save the day. They're able to rescue everyone. Try the Zodiac. It fails because of Stan and Ford. Bill goes inside the wrong Stan's mind. Stanley gets his memory erased, and Bill is defeated. However, in his final moments, Bill calls out to the Axolotl. And this is where I want to wrap it back to the beginning. In Dipper and Mabel Curse of the Time Pirates, the almighty Axolotl reveals that Bill Cipher does miss his home. There is some level of regret, but in order to atone for his sins, he has to take a different form in a different time, which I believe to be King from the Owl House. Although I wasn't the biggest fan of Bill during Weirdmageddon, like part 1, he's amazing. Part 2, I got tired of the frat stick and now lack of a plan, but I gotta say, Mabel's bubble was a genius invention. His only downfall was that he didn't consider the idea of Dipper growing, Dipper maturing, and by extension, being able to snap his sister out of it, having Mabel realize how much she's grown and matured, and the group coming back together stronger than ever. Again, Bill's cockiness was his downfall. If he just petrified Dipper or petrified Mabel, he wouldn't have had to worry, but he wanted to see them struggle. He didn't think they are that big of a threat to the point where they can undermine all of his efforts. And that's what did him in. But for everything else, I can't help but to love Bill as a villain. He's hilarious, he's insane, he's all powerful, but above all else, he knows how to read people. He knows how to spot weakness, and he knows how to turn that weakness into an advantage for himself. Was he short-sighted? Of course. He only has one eye, but for what it was worth, he's a man who knows how to get what he wants, even if he is potentially a weird skull, cat, demon thing now. But as always, these are just my thoughts, and I want to hear yours. What do you think? How did you feel about Bill Cipher's plan throughout the entire series? Did you learn anything new? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, or tweet your thoughts at Roundtable Vids. And for more of my own thoughts, you can find me at Ostrich Thoughts. We're also on Instagram. Bill Cipher loves his deals. After the collapse of his home dimension, Euclydia, this technique has been his best bet when it comes to interacting with our world without a physical form of his own. And Bill has made a lot of deals over the years. And by years, I mean centuries. Far more than we actually got to see in Gravity Falls. So today, I want to run through all the known deals Bill has made, or attempted to make, while also elaborating on some of the more vague deals in the series, like the 2 he formed with Gideon, pulling from not only the show, but Journal 3, the Book of Bill, and This Is Not a Website.com. From the Bill-obsessed witches in Salem to Pacifica Northwest, this is every Bill Cipher deal explained. Also check out Roundtable Rewind, a channel featuring Roundtable videos old and new, re-edited into themed compilations that are perfect for studying, sleeping, drawing, whatever floats your boat really. So be sure to peep. Plug over? Now let's get into it. The first known deal Bill Cipher made was with Modoc the Wise, a shaman who lived in Gravity Falls when Bill Cipher first arrived on Earth, many years ago. Bill wasted no time getting MODOK wrapped around his finger, striking his first ever deal with a human. Build a portal in exchange for the secrets of the universe. Answers that would be provided through this portal's existence. Of course, Bill really wanted this portal so he could unleash Weirdmageddon. MODOK's portal resulted in the creation of the Bottomless Pit, the appearance of lake monsters like the Gobblewonker, and apparently he caused a man's face to be turned into stone. Eventually, MODOK had a premonition of Weirdmageddon, and Bill believes Jezelbaram the Oracle snitched on him, leading to MODOK immortalizing the prophecy in a cave, alongside the key to defeat Bill, before destroying the portal and setting himself ablaze. Bill can't possess him or force him to do anything if he isn't alive. So this deal broke thanks to death. That's a morbid start. Although Bill took a crack at getting the Egyptians to work with him, his next deal would be with the Dark Warlock, the Unpronounceable, a wizard who used his power for mischief and was going through a divorce. So Bill convinced the Warlock that if he could design a portal, they would rule over the Dark Ages together. Bill just needed to lure the guards away from the king's castle so that they can recover a cursed amulet to power the portal. This led to Bill striking another deal, this time with a knight, offering to make him king in exchange for a copy of Monty Python and the Holy Grail, which Bill claimed he lost in the forest. And of course, the knight fell for it. But alas, Bill was tricked! Turns out Stan wasn't the first time he was duped by a fellow con man. The Warlock encircled his portal with unicorn hair, which he used to trap Bill in an orb, meaning unicorn hair can be used to not only keep Bill out of places, but also keep him in places. It's like a prison. The Warlock really just wanted to impress his ex, and he pulled it off. After breaking free from the orb, infuriated by his time spent as someone else's puppet, Bill possessed the Warlock's pet phoenix, burned down the kingdom, and cursed the Dark Ages for 100 years. Suffice to say, this deal was caught off on Bill's end thanks to betrayal. After getting a bad rep in the Dark Ages, Bill almost strikes a deal with the Emperor of Atlantis, but that goes up in smoke after the Emperor sparks an underwater war with the Lobster Lord. So he flees to what's heavily implied to be Salem in 1692, striking a deal with various housewives and turning them all into witches, with the deal being the same across the board. They can break free from their abusive husbands and indulge in their deepest desires so long as they renounce all gods. So they took the deal and started wreaking havoc, tying up and burning the city fathers for a change. But from what we can assess from the Book of Bill, this didn't end well for him, as he presumably failed to coerce them into building a portal. So I guess he just gave up and let the situation sort itself out.
Witch! Witch! Press her between stones!
Bill almost struck a deal with the Founding Fathers, one that would have given him control of the freaking government in exchange for defeating the British. Using government resources to build a portal? Funded by our tax dollars? Actually, that tracks. Anyways, they found Bill's ideas to be a little too extreme and backed out of the deal. Bill made a deal with a man named Thurbert Mudgett Wagstaff III, a copywriter who was struggling to come up with a slogan for a client, so Bill swooped in masquerading as the spirit of inspiration, claiming that he could provide Thurbert with a perfect slogan in exchange for a handshake. Bill's slogan paid off big time, making Thurbert rich off slogan money, as he now has leverage for Thurbert to return the favor, demanding a portal to be made as a sign of gratitude. This led to a domino effect as Thurbert published a cry for help, desperately seeking a way to kill Cypher. This call to action led to an exorcism where Bill turned the tables on his foes by possessing a priest named Opim, demanding a portal once more, and that led to the formation of the Anti-Cypher Society, a movement dedicated to the demise of Bill Cipher. Yeah, can't say that worked out. Thurbert ended up in an asylum, and the deal is technically left unfulfilled. But bro is dead now, so I don't think he's ever fulfilling his end of the bargain. After some more schemes that either fell apart before a deal could be made, or are too vague to discern if a deal really happened, Bill finally had his big break when Stanford Pines undid the shaman spell and summoned him back to Gravity Falls. Wasting no time to butter up Ford and prey on his ego, Bill's quickly able to strike a deal, one that sets many events into motion. Should Ford Pines let Bill into his mind and work together, they could build a portal that would grant Ford everything he wants: infinite knowledge and notoriety. This deal allowed Bill to go in and out of Stanford's body whenever he pleased. Ford resigned his own autonomy in an ironic attempt to make a name for himself. The deal collapsed after a portal test went off the rails and traumatized Force assistant Fiddleford Hadron McGucket, who we have a whole deep dive on that you should check out. Fiddleford's departure, alongside a nightmarish vision of Bill's previous pawns, led to Stanford comforting Bill on his true intentions. Learning that Bill intends on having the Nightmare Realm invade Earth, Ford calls off their alliance. And as the deal died, a lifelong rivalry was born, especially once Ford was thrown into the multiverse and could hunt down Cypher himself. After a few more misadventures across America, Bill will return to Gravity Falls after being summoned by the corrupt child star, Gideon Gleeful, who was now in possession of Journal Number 2. Desperate to knock the Pines family down a peg, Gideon struck a deal where Bill would invade Stan's mind and steal the code to the Mystery Shack's vault. In exchange, Gideon will help Bill with something he's been working on. This is super vague, and they never really elaborate. But given everything we know now, I'm confident that Bill wanted Gideon to gain control of the shack so that he could steer him into the basement and reactivate the portal. Gideon already had the money and thus the resources to get the portal up and running. He would have just needed access. And although Bill never revealed the portal to him, I'm sure Gideon would have went for it, as Bill probably would have offered him a position of power. Let the kid become one of his henchmaniacs. Gideon is someone who gets screwed over the least by Bill's deals. They pretty much never backfire on him until he actually took a stand against Cypher. And I think that's because Bill genuinely likes Gideon, thanks to his psychopathic tendencies. Gideon at this point was a chaotic control freak just like Bill, and that actually saved his life in the long run. Since Bill fumbled getting the code though, Gideon called this first deal off, though they team up once again in the near future. Snooping around the Pines as Dipper becomes obsessed with unlocking a mysterious laptop, Bill swoops in to make a deal, manipulating a sleep-deprived Dipper to believe the laptop was going to erase all its information in a matter of seconds. Dipper caved, striking a deal with Bill. In exchange for having the laptop unlocked, Dipper would give the Dream Demon a puppet. As we all know, this was a trap, as the puppet wasn't one of Mabel's sock props, but Dipper himself, bringing to life one of the most iconic adversaries in the series, Bipper. But before Bill could do too much damage, the deal is unceremoniously called off, as Bill is ejected from Dipper's body. It's unknown if Bill could have re-entered Dipper's body at any point, since the deal's termination is never vocalized, but if that's the case, I think Mabel exposing Dipper's weaknesses probably made it undesirable for Bill to go back to. Thank God he didn't stick around, or else he would have thrown Dipper's body off a water tower. This is not a website.com reveals that Bill actually approached the one and only Pacifica Northwest to make a deal, after the events of Northwest Mansion Mystery. Her parents are furious with her, but she feels like she's improving as a person. But how can that be when she's already the best? She's questioning everything she ever knew, her whole identity. So when she drifted off into dreamland, Bill tossed her into a nightmare where he would confront her in the graveyard behind her family's mansion, speaking to her through a statue of Nathaniel Northwest. He offers her a chance for everything to go back to normal, guaranteeing that she'd never have to deal with the Pines again. All she needs to do is keep an eye out for some new merchandise at the Mystery Shack, a snow globe that should be in stock real soon. If she can snatch that for her great-great-grandpappy, then she'd never have to worry about trivial things like empathy and doing the right thing ever again. Pacifica almost takes the bait, but she takes a moment to reflect instead, saying, "My old life wasn't really mine, was it? All I ever did was follow my mom and dad. Maybe it would be better to make a new one." This only enraged Cypher, who proceeded to berate Pacifica, calling her a impending paternity test, which is something we can definitely unpack another time. Long and the short of it though, Bill rage quit the dream, and Pacifica took down the family tapestry of Bill the following day, feeling oddly reassured that she's making the right decision, and she's relieved that she's building a solid relationship with the Pines. Crisis averted, but it's wild to think that there's a timeline out there where Pacifica is roaming around these streets. After Gideon's scheme to get his dad elected as mayor fails, keeping him in prison for the foreseeable future, he ends up snapping and evokes Bill's presence once more, striking a new deal, one that guarantees Gideon's freedom, but in exchange, he has to serve Bill in the apocalypse, which Gideon is more than happy to do. This actually shakes out perfectly for the two of them, although Gideon's liberation was just a result of Weirdmageddon itself, rather than Bill freeing him directly. So really, Gideon didn't need to make that deal at all. But I think he would have ended up patrolling for Bill Bill regardless, for no other reason than it being a power trip. After Dipper pleads to Gideon and manages to have a breakthrough, Gideon calls off the deal and tries to turn the tables on Cypher. It doesn't work out. Bill puts him in a cage and makes him dance non-stop, while rocking some rather silly drip. It's humiliating, but it's not death, body horror, or petrification, so again, I think Bill is genuinely fond of Gideon. This is a light punishment in the grand scheme of things. After making a second deal with Gideon, but before the offensive Weirdmageddon, Bill makes a trip to the future and lures Blendon Blandon into striking a deal. Fed up with getting bullied by Time Baby and his peers, Blendon buys into Bill's promise to get Time Baby off his back. All Blendon has to do is shake his hand. That's not sketchy at all. This backfires on Blendon as Bill hijacks his body, goes back in time, and unleashes Weirdmageddon after deceiving Mabel. But the deal did come true, because he killed Time Baby. Temporarily. I guess Bill can be a man of his word. Weirdmageddon starts and ends with a trick, as Bill's desperation to undo the law of Weirdman's magnetism causes him to hastily make a deal with who he believes is Ford, when it's really Stan, who swapped clothes with his brother at the last second. Bill attempts to call off the deal once he realizes he's been duped, but Stan knocks his lights out, as Ford tragically wipes his brother's mind clean. It all worked out in the end though. Finally, we have Bill's final deal, one that he made from the weird purgatory-esque rehab facility he's currently held in. And that deal was with you, and me, and anyone who's read the Book of Bill. A deal with the reader. A deal is formed at the start of the book, as in order to read its contents, you must shake Bill's hand and turn the page, giving the demonic Dorito access to the reader's brain. Towards the end of the book, Bill reveals that he's been modifying the reader's brain to make them susceptible to his influence, offering one last deal where the reader would travel to Gravity Falls and shake the hand of his petrified body, allowing him to possess the reader and reignite Weirdmageddon. But the reader's bond to the Pines family, mixed with Bill's own insecurities, leads to him spiraling and throwing in the towel, finding the whole book to be a pointless endeavor on his end, leaving him alone in the Theraprism with nothing and no one but his inner thoughts. And a bunch of weirdos, but like, friendship is a bit of a sore spot for Bill at the moment. And there you have it, every Bill Cipher deal that we know of. Do you wish we could have saw some of these off-screen ones in the show? Let us know in the comments down below.
Mabel, you want me to be a sock puppet forever?
I'm sorry. It looks funny when you're mad.
Sock Opera remains one of my favorite episodes of Gravity Falls to this day, as it offers a little bit of everything that makes this series so great. Dipper and Mabel's sibling dynamic being put to the test against individual self-interest, but they work through it by the end as Mabel sacrifices another chance at romance. There's a few really solid gags, especially one-liners from Stan, who despite not playing a large part in the episode, still manages to have his presence felt throughout. We have an interesting plot hook and advancement with the mysterious laptop that the gang previously recovered in the bunker. Although it's destroyed by the man of the hour, the strongest factor to why this episode is so great, Bill Cipher, who strikes an infamous deal with Dipper, offering to help out with the secrets of the laptop in exchange for a puppet, only to hijack Dipper's body and destroy the computer. Despite this, Bill wasn't exactly lying to Dipper, as destroying the laptop in this episode allowed for the twins to spot the McGucket Labs insignia later on in Society of the Blind Eye, a discovery that went a very long way. However, this also implies that Bill expected to be defeated in Sock Opera, which is unlike the chaotic Dorito we've come to know. And when you notice that, you can't help but to wonder, what was Bill's original plan? What was he going to do if Mabel didn't get the upper hand on him? Well, we've talked about Bill's Cipher plans before, but I did a huge disservice in not mentioning this one, as I find it to be a very dark tidbit of Gravity Falls lore that probably deserves to be discussed more often. Mainly because I know people love edgy moments, and I haven't seen it discussed all too often in the years Journal 3 has been out, which saddens a fellow edgelord like me. That being said, I will issue a potential content warning, as Bill's thought process goes to a dark place. With all that said, let's jump right into it. So, what's so dark about what I'm getting at? Well, Journal 3 gives us a direct perspective on how either Dipper or Mabel encountered their adventures for practically every episode in the series, documenting their thoughts in the journal. For Sock Opera, Mabel takes over, recounting her experience, and includes a note from Bill Cipher that details what he planned to do after obtaining the journal from Mabel's play, both of which give insight on the body and spirit of someone who's unfortunate enough to be possessed by Cypher. The pages read, "Whoa, Dipper and I just got back from this big fight with everyone's least favorite triangle, Bill Cipher. Dipper is upstairs collapsed from exhaustion. I'll write this entry for him. An entry about a monster I call Bipper, Bill's mind, and Dipper's body. To most people, he looked just like my brother. Even I was tricked at first. And I'm normally like, so perceptive. But there's a few tips to tell the difference. 1. Eyes. Look at him sideways and you can see a quick flash of scary cat eyes. And not from the kind of cat you want to pet. This establishes that the Bill Cipher eyes are really not that easy to detect at first glance. It may be visually distinct to the audience, but to the characters, they really have to take an up-close and personal look, which makes me believe that otherwise, those possessed may just appear with normal pupils. Mabel's method is looking at them sideways, but we know a flashlight may also do the trick, as seen by Stanford's interrogation towards his brother in A Tale of Two Stands. Number 2. Hands. Chillingly cold. Is Dipper technically dead while being possessed? Number 3. Smile. Unlike Dipper, he actually smiles, but he smiles constantly and way too hard. I'd never seen Dipper's gums before this, and I never want to again. Number 4. Personality. Insane. Jams forks into his arms, throws his body down the stairs, blinks one eye at a time. But he is way more confident with girls. So, you know, pluses and minuses. And number 5, style. Gotta give the guy props on this one. He wears this suit like a pro. Better posture than Dipper too. However, creepiest of all, when Stan was driving us back home, I found this handwritten note on the floor in the car, which reads,
Note to self. Possessing people is hilarious. To think of all the sensations I've been missing out on. Burning, stabbing, drowning. It's like a buffet tray of fun. Once I destroy that journal, I'll be giving this body its grand finale by throwing it off the water tower. Best of all, people will just think Pine Tree lost his mind, and his mental form will wander in the mindscape forever. Wanna join him, Shooting Star?
I totally ignored Dipper's warnings. I took his journal without asking, and worst of all, I was so obsessed with my play that I didn't even notice Dipper was possessed. And I, of all people, should know, I possessed Dipper's body once too. Hope I never see that swap carpet again. Dipper, whenever you read this, I want you to know I'm sorry. And for next week, I owe you ice cream sandwiches on me. Love, Mabel. I really enjoy that they included this in, as a lot of Gravity Falls fans who watched the series as it was airing probably remember that a lot of people were constantly unhappy with Mabel. Citing sock opera as an example, although I always argued that her sacrifice spoke the loudest of any of her actions in this episode. But alas, clearly Hirsch and the team involved with this book were aware of the backlash towards Mabel and did their best so that an audience that can hold anything against her can finally make amends. Which is also why we get apologetic Mabel in the second Lost Legends story, which you can learn more about in our video, What Happened After Gravity Falls. As for the little lore bits, we know from Bipper sweating, panting, and fainting that a host of Cypher isn't technically dead, but I do believe that Bill's possession could result in a change in circulation or something to that effect as a result of the Dream Demon adjusting to the humanoid form. I mean, look at Bill. He's literally a triangle with arms and legs that are typically limp unless he needs them for gesture or dramatic effect. Not to mention, any spirit inhabiting your body could result in chills or goosebumps. But because Bill is in control, we don't actually witness that reaction. Or maybe, yeah, Dipper's body was dead to an extent. I'm just spitballing ideas here. It makes sense to at least me that Bill was only using the parts of Dipper's body that he needed, and we saw the damage that Bill was bringing upon Dipper's body, but Bill himself was unfazed. So yeah, unless we ever get any elaboration, I can't say that Dipper's body was firmly dead. As for the Mindscape, I do wish this was explored a bit more in the series, but going off Mabel's speculation on Dipper technically being dead when possessed by Bill, I'm compelled to question if Dipper would have been trapped in the Mindscape because his body would be dead by all accounts, or because jumping off the water tower would clearly result in some intense bodily damage. And if Dipper did try to reclaim his body by that point, it wouldn't be in one piece, and unable to function properly for him to survive anyways. I do wonder how many other people Bill could have done this to, booting people out of their body, getting what he wants, and then killing their physical form, so they're stranded in another plane of existence for as long as they live. Could you imagine that being like a scene in sock opera? Dipper seeing a bunch of ghosts in the Mindscape, all begging for their bodies back. Again, I'm a bit edgy. Ultimately, here's a question I want to pass off to you. If they included this plot point in the episode in some way, just as an added stake of, hey, if you lose, Bill's throwing you off the water tower, would the episode have been better or worse for it? I personally prefer the episode we got, as including this moment in the show at that moment would have kind of ruined the mystery of Bill in relation to the twins a bit, as when the episode initially premiered, we still didn't know if Bill needed Dipper and Mabel for his plans. It's a chilling revelation that works after watching the entirety of the series. But as always, these are just my thoughts, and I want you to express yours. What do you think? If you didn't already know, what is your reaction to Bill's full sock opera plan? Love him? Hate him? A bit indifferent? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to find more Roundtable, you can follow us at Roundtable Vids or me at Fox on both Twitter and Instagram. And special thanks to Art with Coda for creating an awesome thumbnail. For more of his wonderful art, you can find him on Instagram at Art with Coda and subscribe to his YouTube channel. Links in the description. If you enjoyed this video, please sort of like and subscribe to the Roundtable for more great cartoon content. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have an awesome day. What really happened to Bill Cipher? The new Gravity Falls book, The Book of Bill, dangles one question over the reader's head for its entire duration. Is Bill Cipher alive? If this is a book that takes place after the events of Weirdmageddon, then how did he write it? How is he still communicating with us? This has been a mystery for well over 8 years at this point, since the climax of the Gravity Falls finale, where if we reverse Bill's seemingly incoherent final words, he calls upon the help of the Axolotl, a cosmic being who's practically a god amongst gods. Fast forward to the book Dipper and Mabel and the Curse of the Time Pirates, and the Axolotl reveals that there's one way for Bill to absolve his crime, a different form, a different time, implying that Bill may have another shot through reincarnation. But then the graphic novel Lost Legends has a hidden code that reads, Bill lives, pointing to the conclusion that Bill did in fact survive and is out there somewhere, waiting for a chance to bounce back. And aside from reincarnation, a popular fan theory is that he actually exists within Stan's head, returning alongside Stan's memory. But finally, after nearly a decade, we have a concrete answer on Bill's fate. Two actually, not just from the book, but from the man himself, Alex Hirsch. What actually went down in Stan's mind? And is it possible that Weirdmageddon could be reignited one day? We're going to be getting into big spoilers from the very end of the Book of Bill. So if you haven't read it for yourself yet and want to find out the answer while reading, click off now. For the rest of y'all, I humbly ask that if you end up enjoying the video to throw it a like and subscribe to the channel for more Gravity Falls content. Now let's get into it. The Book of Bill makes it pretty clear that even though he no longer has his physical form on Earth, or at least it's useless and petrified deep in the woods, his spirit at the very least survived. While the book throws a lot at you, there is a clear through line that starts at the beginning when the reader summons Bill and makes a deal with him. You get to read his book, and he'll explain what he gets out of it a little later on. Don't think too hard about it. By reading the book and flipping through its pages, you're doing Bill's bidding and giving him a new passageway into our reality. And according to Alex Hirsch at one of the Barnes & Noble signings, this means whenever the book is open, Bill is alive. When it's closed, he's dead.
Well, the book is closed, Bill is dead. Well, the book is open, Bill is alive. If you open and close the book quickly, you're bringing him to life and killing him over and over and over again, which he might like. So, you know, like that's kind of, like that's sort of how I feel about fiction, is that it's like, it's both, it's alive when you're thinking about it, it's dead when you're not.
This is very much a spoiler-free answer, one that does track with the book itself without giving too much away, as he's obviously not going to touch on the end of a new Gravity Falls book at an event full of fans who haven't gotten a chance to read their copies yet. But if you flip towards the final pages, you'll find that Bill's survival extends beyond his relationship with the reader. He reveals his plans to restart Weirdmageddon by having the reader go to Gravity Falls and shake hands with his statue, allowing him to possess the reader's body and activate one of the remaining portals on Earth, reassembling his physical form and allowing him to kickstart Weirdmageddon 2.0. But before the reader can go through this devious act, the Pines family interjects with their own perspectives on Bill. Ford tells the reader that happiness can't be found in Bill's plans of world domination. It's found in things like family. Mabel compares Bill to a needy ex, giving him advice on how to move on from Ford. Dipper straight up threatens Bill, stating, "Bill, if you're somehow reading this from whatever quantum afterlife you wormed your way into, listen up, man. You tried to kill my sister. If I ever see you again outside of my nightmares, there is no force in the universe that will stop me from putting you in the ground." I outsmarted the US government, leapt off a cliff, and punched through a robot's head, defeated zombies, outslew Sherlock Holmes, and survived the start of puberty. Come at us again and I'll end you. And then there's Stan, who puts the final nail in the coffin and turns the reader against Bill for good. Oh great, now I gotta write something about Bill. What a bunch of... Look, the little wise guy ain't that complicated. I only met him once and he cried like a baby, and then I punched him to death. What more do you need to know? Sixer's always got some ghoul or warlock chasing after him. Pointy was just the jerk of the week. Yeah, I looked at his so-called book. Too many words if you ask me. Look, take it from a master con artist. If a deal seems too good to be true, that's because it is. Except for at the Mystery Shack, where the deals have never been better. Here's the one thing I don't get though. So we erased Bill, but his ghost is writing a book, right? So where is he right now? If he hasn't told you, it's probably because he hates it there. Otherwise he'd be bragging about the afterlife non-stop, right? P.S. If Bill's so smart, how come we're so much happier than him? Boom. Yeah, this triangle got demolished. This little family chat causes the link between Bill and the reader's mind to weaken, and Bill freaks out.
Isn't that adorable? What cute little characters in their quaint little story arcs. As if you care. If they think you'll throw away your godly destiny for some random mortal family, then they don't know you the way I do. No, the Pines mean nothing to you. You gave me your blood. You let me into your mind. You killed an elf for me without even blinking. And now you're ready for our deal, right? You're ready for our deal, right? No.
No!
Something's wrong. I can see inside your mind. Our link is weakening. After everything I did for you, I showed you my childhood. I broke the fourth wall for you. And this is how you repay me? It's him again, isn't it? I knew it. He's the one who turned you against me. That fumbling idiot con man. That weaker copy of Sixer. Stanley. Stanley. Stanley.
On the day Bill Cipher died, he used the trick he never tried. Shattered, broken, not yet dead, Cipher left the con man's head. A desperate plea, some panicked prayers, to meet the frilly guy upstairs. In a tank outside of space, the opposites met face to face. Just one shot to live again, he pled his case to his old friend.
Look, from one god to another, who cares if I tried to kill those brothers? They're all ants. It's all a game. Let's press restart and try again. I'm too cool and fun to die. Please, just get this angle one more try.
The ex sighed in a knowing way. He expected that this is what Bill'd say. You cannot regrow through denial. You'll have to face my hardest trial. See my program to the end, then you may live again.
Am I fighting demons? Eating ghosts?
You're getting what you need the most. One way to absolve your crimes. To change your form will take some time. Bill could not believe his luck. This salamander was a smuck. Easier than he ever thought it. He faked remorse. The guppy bought it. In combat, Bill was undefeated. Whatever challenge, he could beat it. Bill shook the axe's hand with glee. How bad could these trials be?
What really happened to Bill Cipher when he was ejected from Stan's mind? Well, the axolotl gave him another chance and sent him to rehab, the Theraprism, where he has to reevaluate himself alongside some of the greatest freaks in the multiverse. Look, there's the core from Amphibia. Bill's ticket out of this place is some genuine introspection and atonement for his past. But he doesn't want to do any of that crap. He's got important evil business to attend to. So he created this book as a way to find a new pawn who can bust him out of rehab early, ending the book on a salty yet ominous note for old Billy.
Fine. Is that what you wanted to see? Are you happy now? This is where they stuck me. An overly medicated Kafkaesque health hole with loser-tier villains from every reality until I learned some kind of lesson. I thought you'd have the summon to break me out early, but you turned out like all the rest, just like my worthless hench maniacs who haven't called. just like my miserable family who tried to snuff out my talents. Just like Sixer, who ruined my one shot at liberating reality. Fine, have it your way. What have I learned in therapy? Nothing! This dumb rock can't keep me contained forever. I don't need 1 million followers. I just need 1. It's only a matter of time. And I have all the time in the world. There's always another human. Someone else will pick up the book. Someone else will shake my hand one day. When you least suspect it, I'll be back. As for you, you betrayed me. I'm severing our connection and cutting out our best memories. Snip, snip! Remember the chapter about the Bermuda Triangle? No? Good! It's already working. Soon this will all seem like a dream. Because no matter what the idiot counselors in the smiling cage say, I don't need anyone. I never have, and I don't miss any of them. I'm fine. Someone will let me
out.
Bill Cipher lives, and he's desperate to make his grand reintroduction into our world, as his petrified physical form lies dormant somewhere in the woods, waiting for the moment some sucker finds the statue and is foolish enough to shake his hand, reigniting the cycle all over again. Although he didn't plan on getting destroyed in the Mindscape, leaving behind his physical form before entering Stan's head ultimately ended up being a form of insurance for the old Dream Dorito. Now obviously after reading all this, you're probably wondering, what the hell does this all mean? Between the multiverse tease and mentioning things like Earth's remaining portals, name dropping a Dark Age one in particular, alongside a few other revelations and offhand remarks in this book, like how Bill worship has become edgy around town after Weirdmageddon, it really does seem like more Gravity Falls could be on the table. I mean, we went from Bill's fate being rather ambiguous for 8 years to having his survival spelled out over the course of 200 pages. It feels a little bit more than open-ended to me. After reading the book of Bill, I definitely want to see an adventure that explores how the town has been recovering after the events of Weirdmageddon, and maybe the emergence of a new cult that worships Bill, which in return can allow the Anti-Cypher Society, a cult that was introduced in this book, to step in and try to put a stop to Bill's resurrection. Yeah, a continuation might just be another book instead of a full-blown animated project, but it doesn't really matter to me. As long as we continue to get more stories in this world, I'm all for it. Keeping the series as books enables Hirsch to push the envelope without worrying about the S&P, on top of the fact that he and Disney get to keep making money from the Gravity Falls franchise without having to work with each other on a daily basis. Everyone wins. But as always, these are just my thoughts, and I'd love to hear yours. What's your take on Bill's fate? Is he alive, or just sort of alive? Let us know in the comments down below, and keep the conversation going over on Twitter and Instagram at AwestruckFox and at Roundtable Vids.
Stanley! Stanley, help me! Oh no, what do I do? Stanley! Stanley! Do something! Stanley!
In the early winter months of 1982, scientist and Gravity Falls paranormal investigator Stanford Pines was thrust into his interdimensional portal by twin brother Stanley Pines. Without the proper resources to fix the portal, Stanley would spend 30 years masquerading as Ford, assuming his identity and transforming his house into a tourist trap known as the Mystery Shack. It wouldn't be until the late summer of 2012 where Stan would finally gather all 3 journals written by his brother, alongside a ton of radioactive waste, that allowed the grifter to reactivate the portal and finally retrieve his brother. Ford was back. But he clearly was no longer the same man he was all those decades ago. He initially remained distant from his family by choice. He believed there was no one left to trust, and he wanted to upkeep the image of a lone wolf, a solitary hero. But why? What happened during those 30 years across dimensions that caused Ford to double down with his misguided mindset, instead of coming to terms with his own faults that brought him here in the first place? What did Ford see? What did Ford do? That's what we're here to break down today. Thanks to the information provided in Journal 3 Special Edition, we're going to take a deep dive into the escapades of Ford Pines, taking a look at his time in not just the Nightmare Realm, but every dimension he encountered, his time with the Resistance, his interdimensional allies, and even his rematch with Bill Cipher that was undocumented in the series proper. Strap yourselves in, because it's time to go beyond Gravity Falls. And before we begin, please be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for some of the best Gravity Falls and cartoon content you'll find on YouTube. We're ready to go all out from here to the end of 2021. Ford's final moments on Earth, known in the multiverse as Dimension 46'/, were filled with fear and anxiety that he never felt before. As the portal had its grip on Ford, reeling him in like a fish out of water, he felt weightless. A helpless terror would fill his body as he quickly prepared to face the mysterious forces that drove McGucket to insanity. Suddenly, Ford would find himself swimming through a zero-gravity sea of lightning and ever-changing colors. But it wouldn't be until he whipped out his spare pair of glasses that he could fully process where he was. And he was in the center of a literal living nightmare. The dimension between all dimensions, the in-between space, the gateway to other worlds, ruled by the king of nightmares. This was the fated place he swore to protect the world from, the Nightmare Realm. Ford would describe the Nightmare Realm as something that's not entirely a dimension, but rather a boiling, shifting, intergalactic foam between dimensions, home to the most elusive, strange, lawless creatures. The portal to Earth closed itself behind Ford, trapping him in this unruly wasteland. And to make matters worse, he quickly noticed that he was in the presence of his greatest adversary. Perched on a throne made of illusions, surrounded by silhouetted beasts, was none other than the three-sided demon himself, Bill Cipher.
Look who came to pay me a visit.
Bill taunted.
Care for a game of intergalactic chess? This time, you're the pawn.
At the snap of a finger, Ford would be attacked by a 60-foot ball of fingers and teeth, howling like a humpback whale. Ford bolts behind an asteroid field and makes a mad dash, evading a multitude of Bill's minions. Fortunately, the crater of a passing asteroid would serve as a shelter for Ford, hiding himself deep within its stony caverns. Bill would continue to mock him in the distance.
Sixer wants to play hide and seek. First one to find him and bring him to me gets their own galaxy.
Despite Ford's gut reaction telling him to rush out and give himself up to Bill just for a chance to cuss him out, his impulses were quelled after discovering his shared space with a family of refugees. Gathered around a glittering purple fire, this group of war-torn aliens would recount their life story to Stanford. The refugees were once asteroid miners who got sucked into a wormhole, ending up lost in the Nightmare Realm as a result. Apparently, when most things in the multiverse go missing, they tend to end up here. The refugees would have a visceral reaction to hearing Bill Cipher's name, the leader explaining that Cipher is one of the most feared beings throughout the multiverse. Cipher conquered the Nightmare Realm for the purpose of a hideout, but its definition as a lawless space is quite literal. There are no laws of physics or rules, and thus it's destined to self-destruct. This is why Bill aimed to make Earth his new personal playpen. Ford explained his own history with Bill, and his new goal to put an end to the evil Dorito once and for all. Despite the extremely slim odds of returning home, the refugees aided Ford and his aspirations, giving him rations and a dimensional translator, Model K127X. Ford quickly formulated his plan. He'd travel to as many dimensions as possible, gathering as much information as possible on Bill's strengths and weaknesses. When he's finally ready, he'll return to the Nightmare Realm and appropriately settle the score. Even if he never sees home again, at least the multiverse will be at peace. As Ford departed from the refugees and swam to the nearest wormhole, they would bless his endeavors by chanting, "Praise the Axolotl," invoking the strength of the most powerful, extra-dimensional creature in the Gravity Falls multiverse, essentially saying, God is on your side. Ford claims in Journal 3 that his time in the multiverse felt like living 100 different lives. Traveling with bandits, learning to speak 13 different languages, getting into fistfights with talking chairs, and he even got a tattoo of All-Star by Smash Mouth, with a tribe of octopus-armed piglets. And hey, scoff at that if you want, but I think it's quite impressive that Smash Mouth made a song that transcends our own galaxy. Ford studied ancient text, studied with multi-dimensional scholars, and was crowned king of the finger dimension, thanks to his 6 fingers, until he was dethroned by the arrival of a 7-fingered man. You know, dems be the breaks. Ford's journey also saw him slip into some habits found in the rest of the Pines family, especially his twin brother. Much like Stanley, Ford found himself smooth-talking his way in and out of food and shelter, and in classic Pines fashion, was outlawed from numerous dimensions. If you ask me, being a wanted man in even a single dimension outweighs your brother being banned from most states in America, but to each their own. Ford even racked up a wanted poster of his own that, when decoded, provides two interesting messages. The one across the bottom of the poster reads, "Return for bounty, armed and dangerous." And the one next to Ford's face simply reads, "Rick was here," which is of course from one of Ford's partners during these 30 years, Rick Sanchez. Gravity Falls and Rick and Morty have had plenty of overlap through Easter eggs before, such as Stan's items flying into Ford's portal and coming out of one of Rick's. So I'm sure for many fans, this won't come as a surprise. But seeing that an official crossover is extremely unlikely in our lifetime, given one show is on Disney Channel and the other is on Adult Swim, I'm cooking up another video that maps out a potential timeline of Ford and Rick working together that ties up both of these Easter eggs together. So stay tuned and be sure to keep an eye out for that on the channel. As for what Ford's crimes were in particular, they were centered around amassing stolen supplies to work on his most difficult invention yet, the ultimate weapon, the Quantum Destabilizer, which, if you recall, we did see him attempt to use against Bill in Weirdmageddon Part 1, but alas, he missed, and the shot hit Bill's top hat instead. Ford states that a complete catalog of his adventures would take up 40 volumes of literature, which today sounds like Disney Plus movie potential, so instead, we're provided with the highlights of the most bizarre and significant dimensions he encountered. The M Dimension. To describe this dimension in 2 words would be, according to Ford, extreme frustration. In the M dimension, everything is based on and in the shape of the letter M. From the inhabitants of the world, to the shape of the cars, to the windows on them, to even the vacuum cleaners. The alphabet of the M dimension is nothing more than the letter M 26 times. Most words, and thus sentences, begin with the letter M, Ford being frequently told to "have a wonderful mime." Needless to say, this dimension quickly caused him to feel muicidal, though he cited that the residents were relatively kind to Ford, considering how much of an outsider he must have looked to them. The do-over dimension, also known as the yo-yo dimension. In this world, time moves both forward and backward, without rhyme or reason. Essentially, imagine that one scene from Avengers Endgame with Scott Lang's time travel trials, but as the rules of existence itself. Senior citizens can be transferred into babies, and then back into senior citizens at the drop of a dime. You could have the worst week ever, but then have the opportunity to start it all over. Or you could complete high school and find yourself back in kindergarten. Time can progress at a normal pace for long spans of time, or yo-yo back and forth several times in a single day. There are professional timelineologists that function similar to weathermen, trying to accurately predict what the time will be like on any given day. And the kicker is that you remember every time you relive a section of your life, which can quickly go from a nice perk to right some wrongs to being stuck in a cycle of madness. Your progress in a situation getting constantly erased as you have to do it all over again. I mean, just imagine having to complete a big project 3 times in a row because time keeps setting you back each and every time. Sure, you may have the memory of how to complete it, but the emotional bandwidth will deplete rather quickly after the 2nd or even 3rd time. Knowing that this would interrupt my weekends is enough for me to go absolutely insane. But I digress. LottoCon 9, aka the gambling dimension, is quite literal in name and law. Gambling isn't just legal, it's mandatory. The central government and authority of the dimension rides in Sin City, spelled S-Y-N-N instead of S-I-N. This city is encased within a giant ship that lands on whatever planet wins the yearly lottery to host it. Ford describes the government itself as effective. The Galactic Senate gathers every Saturday at the racetrack to bet on their favorite laws, which seems like it would open up the gates for sabotage and competition, but to each their own. Every aspect of life is left up to chance. Babies are forced to learn how to roll dice before they even learn how to walk. And once you're over the age of 5, it's encouraged that you carry your lucky deck of cards wherever you go. Even soulmates are left up to chance. This is also the dimension where Ford won his infinity-sided die that appeared in Dungeons, Dungeons, and More Dungeons. But ultimately, Ford was removed from this dimension by bouncers who caught him counting cards. Ford, you little cheat! The two-dimensional dimension, otherwise known as Euclydia, should not be confused with the second dimension, the origin point of Bill Cipher, though it is extremely similar, as everything is flat and 2D in this world instead of 3-dimensional. Due to Ford's 3D body, he clipped right through the 2D world, as they have no concept of above, no sky, no sun, no shadows. Ford practically saw nothing. What Ford did see as a straight checkered line, Euclydians would view as different shapes and objects. Ford was considered to be in irregular shape in this world, which to the inhabitants is considered offensive, and was quickly under attack. Ex-Wylians are razor sharp, and Ford's mouth was stuck outside their plane of existence, unable to communicate and explain himself. So it was only a matter of time before they began slicing into his head. But thankfully, Ford would be quickly sucked out of the 2D dimension, being rescued by none other than the Oracle. Ford blacked out and awoke in Dimension 52, noticing that he was in a mountaintop shrine surrounded by clouds, and before him stood the seven-eyed Oracle, Jesselbrom the Unswerving. Now, the cryptogram on her page decodes to the opposite of Bill, which makes it sound like a yin and yang scenario. Makes sense, as even visually, they are exact opposites. The Oracle provided great insight about Bill Cipher, and suggested that before Ford faces off against him again, he would need to have a metal plate implanted within his head, as a means to prevent Bill from possessing and wandering into his mind. Of course, Ford mentioned the metal plate in his head in the episode The Last Mabelcorn, and although Bill was able to interact with him in his dreams, it appears that the surgery did prevent the Triangle from taking control of his body at will. A huge advantage, I'm sure. The Oracle informed Stanford that Bill Cipher actually destroyed his own dimension, including his parents and anyone he's ever known, as a result of his thirst for power. The Oracle didn't seem to hold anger towards Bill, but knew that his reign of terror had to be put to an end. She also informed Ford that he had the face of the man who was destined to destroy Bill, something that only fueled Ford's ego and his hero complex. When in reality, she was of course referring to his twin brother, Stanley, and the events of Weirdmageddon. Just like Bill Cipher's own omnipotence, it's clear the Oracle possesses similar abilities, as she clearly holds knowledge of the past, present, and future, much like Bill does, as his final moment saw his body flash a glimpse of his own fate. After recovering from his surgery and partying hard with the Oracle, Ford awoke in a brand new dimension with no trace of the Oracle in sight. Now, throughout Ford's 30 years, he encountered many parallel Earth dimensions that are largely similar to his home dimension, with major differences sprinkled in. There are Earths where dinosaurs still exist and thrive, taking humanity's place in evolution, just to give an example. But Ford stumbled upon one dimension near the end of his journey, where everything was the same, except Stan never pushed him into the portal, and actually heeded Ford's advice, hiding Journal 1. In this reality, Ford reunited with Fiddleford and created a dimensional vortex neutralizer that allowed them to use the portal without any ties to Bill or the Nightmare Realm. The Ford in this world is a superstar of science, and his home in Gravity Falls became an international institute of oddology. Our Ford came into contact with Parallel Fiddleford, who immediately had Stanford detained as he recognized Ford wasn't from this dimension. As it turns out, this Fiddleford went on his own portal expedition, where a security officer bumped into his parallel self in another dimension. Once they touched hands, the entire dimension began to warp and destabilize, the officer ceasing to exist along with the entire dimension, as Fiddleford and the rest of his team escaped back into their proper home. So although Ford couldn't meet his famous counterpart, he worked with Parallel Fiddleford to finish the quantum destabilizer, and was soon ready to return to the Nightmare Realm. Ford returned to the dimension and immediately began to raise hell. As soon as he arrived, Bill immediately recognized Ford and sicked his minions onto him. Luckily, with his weapon of mass destruction, Ford leveled the playing field. With Bill's minions scrambling for safety, Ford had his chance to attack Bill directly. So Bill ran into the quadrangle of confusion, a maze that defied the laws of physics and sanity. Trying to strike before Bill's forces regrouped, Ford took advantage of the unruly world, and with the defied physics, lunged right at Bill, preparing his weapon for the final blow. This was it. Bill Cipher was finally going to meet his end. Ford was ready to pull the trigger. Fiddleford's mind, broken. Dimensions, destroyed. Ford's trust, Ford's pride, betrayed and humiliated. It all comes down to Ford taking the shot. However, right at that moment, the Nightmare Realm began to shake, thrown further in disarray. A vortex begins to open up. It's Ford's portal. Stan's reactivating it. At a time like this? So, that's why the first thing Stanford did was slug his brother. Stan may have ultimately been aiding Destiny, but to Ford, his crowning moment was ruined by the person who always ruins everything. The person who caused Ford to lose 30 years of his life in the first place. Ford thought he had affirmation that he was destined to be a hero. He was on the cusp of achieving multi-dimensional fame by taking out the bastard he despised most. And instead, here he was, back on Earth, back to square one. So naturally, he went back to what worked most for him, being a social recluse. However, thanks to a niece and nephew, he wouldn't be getting away from his family so easy. And well, the rest is history. Despite Gravity Falls being focused squarely on the town itself, you'd be surprised how deeply connected it is to other shows in both a meta and literal sense. A handful of Gravity Falls alumni branched out to create their own shows that not only have a similar vibe and structure to the iconic Disney series, but have Alex Hirsch involved in some way. Executive producer, voicing a main character, voicing a side character. You get the picture. But some of these shows have crossed over with Gravity Falls in pretty big ways. From major characters having ties with one another, to an entire episode of television being dedicated to the madman that is Stanley Pons. I've talked about most of these crossovers over the years, but with Gravity Falls popping off and gaining new fans every day, alongside most of these shows being over and giving us some new stuff to chew on since I last spoke about them, I thought it'd be great to revisit all of these Easter eggs and connections, compiling them into one big crash course, your guide to the Gravity Falls multiverse. I'm gonna leave out small things like Bill Cipher's cameo in The Simpsons, or a pine tree hat popping up in a cartoon, and focus on the big stuff. Things that have interesting lore implications and tells us something new about the cast of Gravity Falls, despite coming from an entirely different show. The first show Gravity Falls crossed over with actually wasn't a Disney show, and I feel like the further away we get from the 2010s, the more people forget the connections with this cartoon even existed in the first place, which is kinda crazy because it arguably has the most ties with Gravity Falls. I am of course talking about Rick and Morty. It all started with the end credit stinger for Society of the Blind Eye, where Stan loses a mug, a notepad, and a pen to Ford's portal. As it turns out, they weren't just lost in a void. In Rick and Morty's Close Encounters of the Rick Kind, a classic by the way, Rick and Morty are being chased by the Council of Ricks, leading to Rick opening numerous portals to throw them off his trail. And guess what comes out of one of those portals? Stan's belongings. Now, Close Encounters of the Rick Kind actually aired 6 whole months before Society of the Blind Eye, so viewers were exposed to this crossover out of order. I can only imagine Rick and Morty fans were scrambling to figure out what these items meant, unaware that in a few months, they'd be tying it back to a kid's cartoon on Disney XD. Now, I think we're supposed to infer from a lot of these Easter eggs that Rick and Ford are friends. Like, they got an interdimensional bromance going on. Or they hate each other. Either one would make sense. They're two loner scientists with a soft spot for their family. So while Rick was just firing off random dimensions, a part of me wonders if the Gravity Falls universe was calibrated into Rick's portal gun because years prior, he was trying to do Ford a solid and get him back home, when Ford was traversing the multiverse. Ford's wanted poster has a cipher that when decoded reads, Rick was here, which I feel like he'd only do for someone he knows personally, whether if that's a rival or a buddy. Not to mention the episode Morty's Mind Blowers features memory bowls labeled Stanford and Bill C, meaning that either Rick or Morty had memories of the two that were erased. Maybe Morty somehow found out about Ford and Bill's existence, the whole dilemma they got going on, and to ensure that Morty would never be tempted to contact Bill, Rick wiped his memory. Because let's face it, Morty loves his dangerous and irresponsible shenanigans. Or maybe Ford's intelligence got under Rick's skin. So to preserve his own ego, he removed Ford from his memory. Conversely, there's a memory capsule in the black market labeled Rick S in the graphic novel Gravity Falls Lost Legends. So either Rick came to Gravity Falls at some point and was caught slipping by the blind eye, or Ford somehow got his hands on the memory gun and for whatever reason, wiped Rick's mind. Maybe the two realized their minds and knack for adventure would cause way too much chaos across the multiverse and decided to cut their bromance short, wiping each other's memories clean and staying in their respective worlds. Or since this is Morty's Mind Blowers, maybe Morty learned about Ford and thought he sounded pretty cool. But Rick couldn't risk Morty idolizing a cool but bitter old man who's really smart and isn't his grandpa. So he zapped Ford's name right out of Morty's head. I know there's no clear answer to all of this, but it's fun to think about. Some Bill Cipher imagery pops up throughout the show, which is cool, because Bill can see through any depiction of himself, regardless of the reality. Which means he's definitely keeping an eye on the Sanchez family. Rick's portal gun gun is exactly the kind of technology that Bill would kill to get his hands on. And it wouldn't be hard to trick any of the Smith family into making a deal, barring Rick and Space Beth. So it tracks that he keep an eye on them, but he hasn't mustered the courage to actually make a move because he knows Rick would catch on to his act fast. And on the topic of Bill, one of his henchmaniacs, 8-Ball, can actually be spotted dead and decaying in an alien spa's toxin tank in the episode Rest and Relaxation. However, this machine actually removes the toxicity from your body, leaving it as a sentient goopy clone of yourself. So odds are, 8-Ball just came to the spa and used the tank to expel the part of himself that was willing to incite an apocalypse and go on like a week-long rager, even though time was frozen. Homie's trying to better himself. That's probably why none of the henchmaniacs have called Bill while he's in the Theraprism. They're trying to leave that in the past, bro. Also, 8-Ball's alive in Lost Legends, so yeah, this is definitely not his actual dead body. We also know that there's a Dipper Morty and a Mabel Morty out there in the multiverse, as they were spotted in the Citadel of Ricks, and Mabel Morty pops back up in Lost Legends. Despite these two fitting in the greater Rick and Morty mythos, their existence actually connects to the next show that crossed over with Gravity Falls, Amphibia. I don't know how many Gravity Falls fans have seen Amphibia. Like, if you're an Amphibia fan, odds are you're into Gravity Falls, but I don't know how often it's the other way around. Which is a shame, because the show was created by a Gravity Falls alumni, Matt Brawley, who gave us that insane scene from the Gulf War. You know, the one with Big Henry. Amphibia has some pretty cool lore and a whole ass crossover episode of Gravity Falls, Wax Museum, the episode that concludes the road trip arc that kicked off season 2. Anne and the Planters have almost reached Newtopia, the capital of Amphibia that may have the answer to getting Anne back home. But they make one more stop, a small town named Stony Gulch, and it isn't long before they wind up at the Curiosity Hut, an alternate universe version of the Mystery Shack ran by Mr. Pons and his trusty janitor, Frog Soos. But this is a universe where Stan never took in Dipper and Mabel for a summer, so he's a lot more corrupt and money hungry. Whereas the Stan we know and love has a lot of fake attractions at the Mystery Shack, all the attractions Mr. Pons has in the Curiosity Hut are real monsters. They're just encased in wax. Anne, not knowing any better, volunteers to be one of Mr. Pons' attractions so she can obtain a CD player from Earth that somehow winded up in Amphibia. Mr. Pons tries to blindside her, only to get his comeuppance as all the monsters are freed from the wax and kills him.
Calm down, everyone. It's just wax.
Except for that curator, he's dead.
No, this is cute as its own 11-minute thing, but there's a joke from Frog Soos that, as a certified lore whore, I can't help but read into.
Say, Mr. Pons, do you ever get the feeling that we exist simultaneously in multiple parallel universes, completely unaware of the other's very existence?
Frog Soos ponders that they exist in every reality, something that's not only validated by Gravity Falls itself, but Dipper Morty and Mabel Morty. I'd like to think that this ties back into the Bill Cipher Zodiac, that if you're a symbol on the wheel, you exist in every reality, and you're pretty easy to identify. And on the topic of Bill, he appears in a book called Dr. P's Guide to Magic and Mystery. When Amphibia was still on the air, a lot of fans speculated that Dr. P could be short for Dr. Pines, and that this book was written by Ford or an older Dipper. But now that the series is finished, I'm pretty sure it was written by a character named Leaf. Without going into too much detail, she was able to traverse the multiverse for a bit. Although as far as we know, she only came to Earth and then back to Amphibia. It makes sense she's aware of Bill, since she was able to travel the multiverse. He probably saw her as another opportunity to unleash Weirdmageddon and made contact with her. But thankfully, she knew better than to work with him. Amphibia's big bad, the Core, is also currently in the Theraprism, after having its ass handed to it by Anne. I almost feel bad for Bill. A hive mind of narcissists is a lot to deal with, but hey, he's no better. Also, you know how Bill has beef with the Time Baby and tries to kiss the axolotl's ass? Well, I think there's another god out there who he's aware of and vice versa. The Guardian, aka the Three Stones deity, Amphibia's god who might be overseeing the entire Disney TVA multiverse. If I had to guess though, the Guardian's not fond of Bill, considering how disappointed it is in mortals for handling the power of the Calamity Stones irresponsibly. All Bill does is use his godly power irresponsibly.
How about this?
Let's move on to our last show, The Owl House. Not only created by the incredibly talented Dana Terrace, but it features Alex Hirsch voicing 2 prominent characters, and it's a show that directly references Amphibia. And his appearance on Earth is randomly acknowledged in it. I like to think that all of these shows take place on the same Earth, different states just have different art styles. A lot of early teases for The Owl House actually came from Gravity Falls Lost Legends, in the story that Dana helped illustrate. There's a wanted poster of Ida the Owl Lady, and somehow Albert, Ida's palisman, ended up far away from home. Somebody save my boy from the Gravity Falls black market! Of course, the biggest and most well-known connection between Gravity Falls and the Owl House is that, in a shocking twist, Ida is actually Stan's ex-wife. I've made a whole video about this that you can check out, but Ida has a track record for traversing between Earth and the Demon Realm, stirring up trouble and swindling the masses. And she did this under the alias of Marilyn, which just happens to be the fake name of Stan's ex-wife, who he describes as having pale skin and a sharp tooth, wearing a shirt that says, "Over 30 and very flirty." Sound familiar? Also, this is not a website.com describes Marilyn as cursed and goat tooth. And I mean, yeah, Ida is both of those things. It's definitely her. According to Stan, they got married in Vegas, but it only lasted for a weekend. She just wanted his money in his car. Aw, Ida, why'd you have to do him like that? Well, Stan's a con artist, so I guess it's just karma. I should also touch on an old theory that King from the Owl House is actually a reincarnation of Bill Cipher, both being voiced by Alex, the axolotl saying Bill would be reincarnated as a different form in a different time, King allegedly wielding immense power by having large gaps in his memory. It was a fun idea that people had just enough to work with. But now that we know what really happened to Bill, and what King's whole deal is, it's safe to say that the theory is dead in the water. The Owl House definitely has the fewest direct Easter eggs of the 3, but it's still very easy to rationalize why all of these universes are connected. At the end of the day, it's just fun to think that the characters of all these cartoons I adore can coexist. I think people can be soured on the idea now because of the MCU-fication of Hollywood, but I grew up with Cartoon Network and those little city bumpers they used to have, so I've always ate this kind of stuff up. It'd be nice if at least the Disney shows could have an official crossover one day that isn't just Chibiverse. No shade to Chibiverse, I like Chibiverse, but give me something a little more Jimmy Timmy Power Hour. And there you have it. Every Gravity Falls crossover explained, at least for now. Who knows what the future has in store? What kind of crossovers would you want to see with the series? Let me know in the comments down below, and keep in touch by giving me a follow on Twitter and Instagram at OstricFox and at Roundtable Vids.
Welcome back to the Roundtable. I'm Redshirt Nemo, and although Gravity Falls has been over for quite a long time, the conversation around the animated series never ceased to exist. Someone is finding the show for the very first time every single day, which means someone is finishing this show every single day as well, craving more content. That's where we come in. Not too long ago, we filled you guys in on what happened after Dipper and Mabel undid the Oddpocalypse. But what about all of the missing pieces? The parts of the show that wound up on the cutting room floor. You can tell from the title of this video, that's exactly what we're talking about today. We're talking about the most important deleted scenes and scrapped episodes of Gravity Falls that deserve to see the light of day. Let's go through mainly the second season of the show and learn what could have been, alternate character moments, action scenes, and more. You're watching Tuned In. Let's start with an alternate Bill Cipher intro. A dream sequence, assumably in the episode Dreamscapers, was planned where Dipper can be seen immersed in a mysterious red light before the roof of the Mystery Shack is ripped off and sucked into a black hole. Lightning generates from this hole only for a tiny Bill Cipher to fly out. Isn't he so cute? Bill snaps his fingers, summoning his cane, and tap dances in front of Dipper for a grand entrance. Bill tips his hat, which as a result tips the environment around Dipper until Bill readjusts his hat back into place. Revealing just a portion of his knowledge to Dipper, Bill multiplies into 3 versions of himself, each with a fact about Dipper. Maybe he read his Wikipedia page. Zinger. These 3 secrets being his fear of uncertainty, his real name not being Dipper, and his crush on Wendy. After Dipper freaks out, Bill explains that he was hired by Gideon to break into Stan's mind and steal the combination to the safe that contains the deed to the shack. As Dipper voices his concerns, Bill snaps once more, transporting Dipper to midair, causing our protagonist to descend at great speeds. Bill teases to Dipper that there's a way to his defeat, but instead of tipping him off now, he challenges Dipper to figure out a way into Stan's head, which is embodied onto the grass plane as a giant stone head. Dipper's close to becoming a pancake on the ground when he wakes up from the dream. He checks his hands only to see a note from Cipher that reads, "The dream was real, and look on your other hand." Dipper looks to find Bill chew a turkey. Very classy. This infers that originally Bill was able to be a lot more tangible with the real world, or at least his host once he entered the mind of his host. Though I prefer how they did it in this show a little bit more. Next up is a deleted scene from Scarioki. The episode's storyboard pitch featured a longer alternate introduction, where prototype versions of Agent Powers, named Agent Element originally, and Agent Trigger work in the Department of cover-ups, the sign of which is covered up itself to read the Department of Nothing. An alarm goes off, which they try to cover up, but their monitor reveals energy signatures from Stan's portal and tracks back to Gravity Falls. This is how the agents originally arrived in town. Act 1 of Scarioki was also different, with news reports of the aftermath of Gideon Rises, as opposed to the grand reopening of the Mystery Shack. The Pines family and the Mystery Shack employees were shown being interviewed for their thoughts on the whole Gideon situation. The idea to throw a party for the reopening was originally due to Mabel starting her own business, Crazy Mabel's Party Planning and Cat Sitting, which honestly is something Mabel probably did off screen anyways. Dipper also urged the townfolk to be alert on the next paranormal threat, warning that it's too premature to party, only to be disregarded as a crackpot. Classic Dipper. This, alongside customers at the shack treating paranormal activity as a joke, would have planted the seeds in the episode itself for Dipper to hastily work with the government agents. It still makes enough sense when he does in the show, so this wasn't really necessary, but it would have been nice extra padding for that plot point. Wendy and Soos also converse about the earthquakes that's really Stan's portals tests, making the old man paranoid. And you know things are wrong when Stan freaks out. There was also an alternate take on Stan's reflection towards Dipper. When the zombies begin to invade, Stan is shown taking down all the signs that lead to the Mystery Shack and fear of the government agents. However, his conclusion is still the same, comparing Dipper to himself while staring at a literal reflection of himself in the gold plating of Journal 3. This would have led to an alternate battle with the zombies that include the golf cart exploding, pinatas being consumed, and blindfolded Toby determined, nearly hitting the zombies instead. Mabel would have also used the karaoke machine to combat the zombies and a shaken up soda can to blow off one of their heads, which is extremely dark and I love it. Another deleted scene from the episode would have featured Dipper finding a zombie survival kit, which he would open just to pull out a noose, implying the only way to survive is to kill yourself. You can see why this was cut. Now let's move on to scenes from Into the Bunker. Alternate scenes from this episode show the shapeshifter posing as the author, acting a bit more deranged yet welcoming towards Dipper and Wendy, cherishing a Pez dispenser and offering the two water, very polite. Although there's a joke that if Wendy slips up and touches the red spigoter, it'll flood the place and drown them all, so not as polite. In an alternate ending, instead of Soos recovering the laptop that reads property of F, he finds an ID for Project Polygon that belongs to Old Man McGucket, which would have likely served as a direct segue into the episode Society of the Blind Eye. There's an alternate end tag where Stan, walking out of the basement, encounters Dipper and Mabel. Two parties both lie about their author-related adventures of the night and agree to sleep until 4 in the afternoon. But what about deleted scenes in everyone's favorite mini-golf-related adventure, the Golf War? Well, originally, Pacifica's remark on how money makes problems go away would have been followed up with her throwing a pile of money on the ground, to which townfolks grab and pick at the money like chickens. It's funny, but it's also kind of true. Dipper and Mabel's discovery of the little puttians was originally a tad different, with these little golf people dancing, feeding a miniature cow, and just living in their society until they noticed they're being monitored. From there, they asked the little puttians for their help. Sock Opera also had its fair share of deleted scenes. The Cold Open had a slightly different design and method of Dipper powering up the laptop, utilizing more wires and outlets. Dipper's confrontation with Bill Cipher in this episode went down a little differently as well. Bill reveals he was present for the events of Into the Bunker, impressed with how Dipper defeated the shapeshifter. Bill also claims dream magic can't hurt Dipper, creating a giant muscular arm that faces right through Dipper. In general, Bill's a lot more mobile and friendly with Dipper throughout this exchange. Once Bill possesses Dipper's body, he takes a bit more advantage of all 5 senses in the human body, putting hot sauce on cake and rubbing it on his face. Mabel's play also had different execution, inflating Mabel's ego and making her seem more independent than she actually is until her puppet meets Puppet Gabe. Sock Opera also had a different end tag, where Gabe sat in Greasy's diner by himself, taking out his guilt towards treating Mabel poorly through his puppets condemning him. This guy has issues, man. In Soos and the Real Girl, the introduction to Hoo Ha Owl's Pizza Matronic Jamboree was different, with Stan observing the indulgent nature of the venue, inspired to obtain an animatronic after Willy Badger successfully pulls a load of money from customers. We also get a few different scenes of him contemplating and scheming of stealing the animatronics for his own benefit. But what about one of the show's darkest episodes, Society of the Blind Eye? Well, aside from Stan joining in Soos' sing-along to Straight Blanchin', an incredible track I might add, the gang's infiltration into the Museum of History was altered. Originally, an elderly security guard was going to lock every conceivable entrance into the building, but cracked open a window because he didn't want it to get too drafty. His heart was in the right place, but he may want to brush up on dictionary definitions. Lazy Susan, waking up from her memory wipe, also would have seen her donate to the Society of the Blind Eye after being scammed into doing so by Blind Ivan. Another member speaks up on the morality of doing this to people, only for Ivan to wipe the minds of everyone who questions his authority. No, I take it back, this dude has issues. Not What He Seems has an incredible amount of deleted scenes. The original title was The Return of Stan, but was altered due to obvious reasons. When Agent Power and Agent Trigger confront the twins, which leads to Dipper questioning on their survival of the zombie attack, instead of Power remarking that he used Trigger as a human shield, he states that the zombie only ate part of his brain that contained a sense of humor, and that it was just a small bite. A joke in reference to Men in Black that ultimately found its way into the season 2 premiere Scarioki. Makes you wonder how far in advance these episodes were in the pipeline before airing or even hitting post-production. The agents also revealed they've been watching the Pines family in a more direct manner that addresses their cameos throughout the first half of season 2. There's also a brief joke of Stan claiming there's nothing up his sleeve once he's in custody, only for everything a magician magician would have to literally shoot right out of his sleeve. One of the more interesting things scrapped from Not What He Seems was an entire scene where Agent Trigger takes Dipper and Mabel to the government-owned historical learning institution. This is where Trigger was going to keep Dipper and Mabel before child services could pick them up. Kerpranked with Justin Kerprank was still involved with the episode as the program was interrupted by a news report of Stan's arrest, being viewed by Dipper and Mabel on a television in their school. Dipper gets the idea to check the security tapes of the shack to prove Stan's innocence, but Mabel points out that they're trapped. It isn't long until Dipper remembers he has the president's key and uses it to unlock the door, escaping the facility after fighting off Trigger and another agent. Trigger's speech to Dipper would have went down after Dipper and Mabel restrained the agent. This would have been a great alternative to Manly Dan attempting to straight up murder Agent Trigger and the kids, especially as it relied on a plot point many people were awaiting years to return. Ultimately, it was scrapped for time. The episode A Tale of Two Stans would have originally featured a recap of previous events leading up to Ford walking out of the portal. Stan would have also had a bloody nose after being punched by Ford. Ford originally also had a long, untamed beard when emerging from the portal, generally appearing to be more dirty and barely scraping by as opposed to the cunning survivalist he is in the final version of the episode. The remove shot of Stan and Ford adjusting the glasses at the same time would have also occurred after Mabel questioned just what the heck was going on in their current situation. Dipper's realization that Ford is the author of the journals would have also been a gradual deduction as opposed to being fed to him by Stan's final line in the previous episode. It would have been little things like him seeing Ford's 6 fingers match exactly with the 6-finger journal. As opposed to being bullied about his 6 fingers on Glasshard Beach, Ford would have been confronted by Stanley at a different instance during this grand retelling of their past. The twins would have been in their bedroom as a young Ford held up his hand to the window. Stan would have promised Ford a life of adventure from said window as opposed to being right there on the shore. There also would have been more fun moments and banter of the twins growing up, such as watching movies and Stan creating a disturbance in class, swapping glasses with Ford in a lighthearted attempt to shift the blame. Before Stan and Ford were called into the principal's office for Ford to be offered the chance of a lifetime, initially the two were at the science fair, Ford teasing Stan over his footbot and Stan trying to grab the attention of female classmates to no avail, again highlighting both their dynamic and status as social outcasts. Stan staging his death by crashing his car was also cut. Stan actually put a dummy of himself in the driver's seat before pushing it off a cliff and crying for help. A member of the mafia would have been showed reading about Stan's death, remarking, "At least somebody got him." Dang, that's dark. What's most exciting about the deleted scenes of this episode for me is the original end tag, of which a heavily altered version of the sequence ended up as a cold open for the last Mabelcorn. Ford returning to his old room introduced in the episode Carpe Diem, finding it difficult to lay down due to everything feeling all wobbly. The time on his clock began to slow down, the rainbow light of the prism melts away, the environment turns black and white, and Ford hears a familiar cackle that transitions into the sudden appearance of Bill Cipher. Bill refers to Ford as his old partner and that for a while he was trying to keep the Pines family from uniting with their lost uncle. However, Bill finds the return of Ford a much more fun alternative to him being lost in the Nightmare Realm. Bill also hints that Stan's activation of the portal can serve to Cypher's advantage. Ford remarks that Bill has no dominion in this world, but Bill retorts that things change. The room begins to set on fire as the cameras close in on Bill before Ford abruptly wakes back up, his surroundings back to where they were prior to the inception. While I do find this more intense than the cold open in the last Mabelcorn, it might have been better to hold this scene off until then as a way to build anticipation and tension as opposed to giving us a scene with Bill and Ford right then and there. It also allowed us to discover Ford and Bill's relationship in a way that made Ford momentarily untrusting. Speaking of the last Mabelcorn, a brief fight was cut from the episode at the last second. The scene consisted of Mabel, Candy, Grenda, and Wendy engaging in combat against the unicorns, exchanging blows and all. While this scene was fully animated, it was ultimately cut for time. Moving on to roadside attractions, the opening of the episode originally had Mabel buying goods from the ice cream truck, the ice cream man striking a strong resemblance to Blind Ivan. Mabel requests that Dipper asks two girls hanging out outside the shack for a nickel to pay for their ice cream, to which Dipper gets cold feet. He still tries to go for it, but bombs horribly. I can relate, Dipper, it's okay. This was the original catalyst for Dipper's flirtatious mission in the episode, before being changed to another Dipper likes Wendy episode. Dipper's interaction with the girl in the corn maze Soos gets stranded in was more fleshed out before being reduced to a montage. The German girl in question was going around to every horrible museum in America to laugh at it. Dipper joins in on this mocking as a way to hit things off. The original end tag for the episode would have seen Soos stranded in the corn maze, etching "Help, I'm bored" into the maze. Two helicopter pilots find him and hand him a book of maze puzzles, which he's absolutely stoked by. Dipper and Mabel versus the future. During the scene where Dipper is holding on to the alien pod keeping Ford captive, he would have passed Robbie and Tambry making out, taking a selfie before being splashed by water caused by the ship's speed. A brief scene with Stan would have saw him find a long-lost ponytail extension and be mocked by Pacifica. While this was likely cut due for time, I also like to imagine this was cut due to the backtracking of Pacifica's character development. And finally, let's take a look at Weirdmageddon Part 1. In this episode, there was a cut scene where Bill mimics and taunts Ford moments before turning him into gold. Ford would have also spat on Bill's eye, a wad of saliva that Bill would have licked off with a tongue hidden underneath the eye itself. Ugh, there's just so much wrong with that. Dipper would have had a direct interaction with Chandra Jimenez, as she interviewed Dipper on the streets of the Oddpocalypse with a rat as opposed to a microphone, showing that she has actually snapped. Mr. Poolcheck and Manly Dan also appeared appeared hiding in a dumpster, warning Dipper to find cover as they restart society in their hideout, implying they've been feasting off cardboard. It's just dark, man. We all know Bill Cipher is a showman, but did you know he was planned to have a Weirdmageddon song titled It's Going to Get Weird? An entire demo for this song was recorded and even storyboarded by a fan after its online release, but was cut for time. Bill, we're all waiting on that mixtape, man. You gotta drop it. An extended scene with the Field of Weirdness bubbles was also cut after being filmed, where live-action Dipper and Wendy, played by their voice actors Jason Ritter and Lindy Cardellini, are taken aback by their new physical forms. Dipper would be freaking out while Wendy admires her good looks. In Weirdmageddon 2, Escape from Reality, a parody of Snarf from Thundercats would have briefly appeared, disturbing a pixie when Dipper, Wendy, and Soos arrive in Mabel Land. Xyler and Kraz actually named the colors exclusively to Mabel Land: Red Purple, Tubble Orange, and Awesome Marine. In these deleted scenes, Xyler and Kraz also introduced the 5 fun zones of Mabel Land: Glowstick Forest, Hunk Mountain, Sweater Town, Scrapbooktopia, and Radical Beach. Back in the Pyramid, Bill's anger at the weirdness bubbles restricting him and his henchmaniacs would have saw more of Bill's allies and even Pacifier, originally named Demonicious, give insight into the situation. They would have explained to Bill why the weirdness bubble keeps them bound to the town. 8-Ball would have suggested that they just party harder, only for Bill to reduce him to dust. Oof. Yes, 8-Ball would have been killed by Bill prior to their defeat in Weirdmageddon 3. Bill also uses another random henchmaniac's bones as a coat after failing to give him more suggestions. While this would have been more brutal, it would have preserved the brutal unpredictability we came to expect from Bill that faded for a while after he unleashed Weirdmageddon. One more piece of bad news would have set Bill off when Keyhole runs in, letting Bill know Gideon allowed Dipper to escape into Mabel's bubble. Bill would have erupted into flames, and it would have been a stark contrast to how Bill behaves in the final version of Escape from Reality. Despite the setback, he's still cocky and upbeat. Originally, in the episode's climax, Dipper would have actually murdered Dippy Fresh. Dippy Fresh walks up to Dipper, claiming Dipper's head is on backwards before actually flipping it backwards, only for Dipper to retort, "Your head is on backwards," and snap Dippy Fresh's neck. Oh my god! In the third part, Weirdmageddon 3 Take Back the Falls, little Gorny, who was previously devoured by the Summerween trickster, would hold on to hope that Ford could undo Bill's weirdness. This would be accompanied by Pacifica and Sheriff Blubs mourning their own losses. It's a very dark opening to the episode, but it actually would have fitted well and set the tone for the series finale. Cthulhu would have also had a cameo, speaking in complete sentences. He would have been guarding the pyramid when he spots a helpless kid. Before he can eat the kid, the Shakatron throws Greasy's diner at the monster, making a triumphant alternate entrance. An extended version of the credits sees much more festivities for the Pines family and friends. Face painting with Head Shin, Mabel dancing with McGucket, Dipper playing the tuba with an audience of Mabel and Wendy, Mabel painting Robbie's nails, Stan and Ford fighting over female's affection, and so much more. All of this would have accumulated in the revelation that the credits is actually a scrapbook Mabel's presenting to her class, chronicling how she spent her summer vacation. I'm not crying, you're crying. Now let's talk about some scrapped episodes in the series. There's actually a scrapped episode that was meant to be a parody of the movie Labyrinth. In a writer's panel podcast with JG Quintel, Hearst revealed an episode for the middle of the first season. The episode would have been a parody of the movie Labyrinth. Dipper as the brother who was stolen, and Mabel as the reluctant sister who would rather hang out with the David Bowie Groblin King. It would have begun with Mabel watching a Labyrinth-like movie for the 9th time, and Dipper complaining about it so much, she wishes him away. The B-plot would have followed Dipper, who reveals he hates the movie because he's terrified of puppets, and how he overcomes this fear. The episode was scrapped because Disney executives didn't think anyone would understand the reference. But they're so wrong. Another scrapped episode was a B story with a Stan and Wendy heist. In this B-plot, Wendy gets grounded by her father for frequently getting into trouble. To blow off steam, Wendy shoplifts from the Mystery Shack but is caught by Stan. Instead of being punished, Wendy is offered an alliance with Stan as he sees a gift within her. There would be a dope training montage of Stan training Wendy to become the best shoplifter she can be. Ready for their biggest heist, Wendy sets their sights on stealing a diamond from the Gravity Falls History Museum. They attempt to steal the diamond but are caught. Stan takes the fall for Wendy, claiming everything was his idea and Wendy was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Stan later tells Wendy in jail that he's lived his life, but she still has one and she should live it to the fullest. It would have been great to see more Stan and Wendy bonding. Unfortunately, this would have been only about 9 minutes of screen time, and unable to think about a good A-plot to accompany this episode and fill the other 13 minutes, the B-plot ended up on the cutting room floor. There was another scrapped episode titled Gum Commercial. In it, Dipper and Mabel compete in a contest for a twin-heavy gum commercial, which takes them to the Twinstitute, where they meet the other twin competitors and realize they're the most boring twins ever. The message would have been about how every twin is unique, likely taking inspiration from Alex Hirsch and his own twin sister Ariel, but the show's crew found the episode a bit too dumb to fully realize. The final scrapped episode we're talking about is Headless Hunter. In it, Stan disconnects Dipper and Mabel from technology after firmly believing it's evil by embarking on a camping trip. During this trip, they're hunted by a headless demon hunter. At one point in this episode, they would have stayed in the cabin of the hunter and turned on the lights in the room only to find the heads of other hunters mounted on the walls. The crew find it to be much creepier than they anticipated and scrap the idea entirely. Wow, that was a lot, but hey, in this case, a lot is just barely enough. Which deleted scene or scrapped episode was your favorite? Which one would you love to see animated one day? In fact, there's a chance we could get something along those lines. science. This isn't just lying to ourselves like we usually do either. There's reason to believe that we could get more Gravity Falls content in the future, but that's a video for another time. For now, comment below your favorite deleted scenes or tweet your thoughts to us at Roundtable Vids, or for my own thoughts, follow my own Twitter at itsretronemo.
As I've begun to revisit Gravity Falls on this channel, one concept that was always just so damn unique to me was the Dorito Devil himself, Bill Cipher, gaining a physical form in our reality. A catastrophic event that finally came to fruition at the end of Dipper and Mabel vs. the Future, going into the Weirdmageddon trilogy. And although I was totally content with how Bill appeared in Weirdmageddon, I do wish they did more with the fact that he was in our reality and that he had what seemed to be unlimited power just confined within the bubble of Gravity Falls itself. Don't get me wrong, I don't think he would have looked great as a giant pyramid the entire time, but if there are things I wanted more of out of this arc that simply could not have existed due to time, it's moments like the cold open of Weirdmageddon Part 1, the different layers of evolution that Bill quickly went through before completely manifesting in Gravity Falls. Like what, he's blue and then metal and has human-like guts? Or even right after, where he's a giant rotating pyramid with multiple limbs, appearing jet black with a touch of a multicolored gradient. Now that is a look that he should have rocked more. We also get a similar but brief transformation in Weirdmageddon 3, Bill assuming the form of a giant, layered, grotesque, multi-limbed pyramid, but this time like red, you know, like when he got angry in Dreamscapers. It was cool. But when it comes to wanting more, sometimes a look at more can be a blessing and a curse. It can be cathartic yet taunting. They thought of this, but we didn't get this, even though I understand why. And the many transformations of Bill Cipher is no exception. Years ago, while we were in the thick of Weirdmageddon, we actually were gifted with concept art by character designer Robert Ryan Corey. That, wouldn't you know, features different transformations of what Bill's physical form could have been. Now, we have absolutely no context to this, so I thought it would be fun to look at these forms and try to re-jog my memory, providing speculation and ideas for how these pieces of concept art and designs could have been implemented into the show proper. With all that said, let's dive in. Right off the bat, I'm going to start with what I find to be the coolest one. He looks like a boss fight pulled straight out of a 3D platformer. A gigantic, I guess humanoid Bill, with a tiny pyramid-esque shape for a head, and his standard one eye, attached to what essentially looks like a roided up cyborg, with a second gigantic eye in the center, a pretty buff torso, lanky, elongated arms, with Dipper in his clutches, and what I find to be the most interesting detail, very short robotic legs and feet, with the 6-fingered symbol on the inside. Aside from the cool factor, the use of forward symbol always piqued my interest because it had me thinking, were the 10 symbols going to have a different role in relation to Bill? Because this piece of art has always given me the vibe that Bill more or less absorbed Stanford. Maybe he extracted his soul. Some variation of the story that delved deeper into the symbols, or more so, the characters represented by them. What sort of magic or cosmic power enabled these ordinary people to come together, stand on a depiction of the Zodiac, and straight up glow? Is there a power within each and every one of them that maybe Bill would have been able to siphon out of each and every one of them, becoming more powerful and transforming as a result? Because again, with Dipper and Bill's clutches in this particular piece, this piece of art could have came into play when Ford was initially captured by Cypher. When you revisit the scene, Ford alludes to the Zodiac, and Bill even gives a strong nod to the 6-fingered symbol, so perhaps substituting the "why did the old man do this" bit, Ford could have became a different kind of prisoner, Bill zapping and absorbing him, evolving into the form we see here, which would kind of make sense given the giant eye. Think about it, Stanford is knowledge, Bill is also knowledge. They are both walking curriculums, with the notion of Bill sees everything, absorbing one of the most intelligent and unique men in the world, again alongside any potential cosmic forces. They should have explained it more. I can see this second and large eye being representative of Bill gaining all of the information that Stanford possesses. Now he truly sees everything. He has an extra pair of eyes. And I don't know, maybe he can shoot even more lasers out of them. Ooh. Moving on to the next piece of concept art, which has me thinking along the same lines of Bill absorbing or merging with someone, we have this faceless horned demon with Bill's proper body branching out of the back. He even still has the bow tie and the floating top hat. Now this very much so reminds me of the Henchmaniacs. As Bill's pawn, again, perhaps he could use them as a power boost. Or maybe he imbued them with a piece of himself, allowing them to transform into and manifest a piece of Cypher onto their body. Or maybe this was just a form Bill could have shapeshifted into without any additional power-up. He sees one of our beloved characters on the streets of Gravity Falls, he transforms into this and begins chasing them. Maybe in addition to Gideon and his prison crew, or substituting them, this transformation or extension of Bill could have been the one chasing down Dipper, Wendy, and eventually Soos to Mabel's bubble. This does have a look of a creature that would chase after a car. I can perfectly see this variation of Bill chasing down the car through the weirdness bubbles. Ultimately, I am satisfied with what we got. I thought it was a great way to redeem Gideon, but this is Bill. He feasts on nightmares. So the idea of him shapeshifting into a literal walking nightmare, it's something I'm surprised they passed up. But at the same time, these two pieces of concept art do break the idea that Bill as a whole will always have a predominantly triangular form, and not just reducing that to a component of his look. So I can see why they were ultimately passed on, and that takes me to the third and final piece of concept art, one that I understand why they didn't keep it, a 6, probably 10-eyed Bill Cipher, in the form of a gigantic pyramid with 3 layers, 6 limbs, a giant top hat, no bow tie, larger than the literal mountains, running amok with Mabel captured. Now the main point of touching on this one isn't more so, oh I wish we got this in the show, but more of, oh we actually kinda did get this in the show. This is very similar to the other aforementioned pyramid forms that Bill possessed in 2 of the 3 Weirdmageddon episodes. I think this piece of art best embodies the mayhem, yet consistency that Alex Hirsch desired. Bill's a triangle. Any form of him has to clearly be a triangle. But that doesn't mean they can't go fucking nuts with multiple limbs and tongues and eyes. It just can't break the mold of a triangle. That being said, I still would have loved to see any of those forms rampage through Gravity Falls, destroying everything in sight. Not just for Bill to unleash the Henchmaniacs, throw a giant pyramid in the sky, and turn everyone into stone. For him to take out actual wrath on the Pines family, really rubbing in the most petty and destructive nature that he won. But hey, what can you do? I've probably said it way too much in this video, but I love Weirdmageddon just the way it was, even if I do have desires on how it could have been improved or, well, just expanded upon. But as always, these are just my thoughts, and I want to hear yours. What do you think? How do you feel about this Bill Cipher concept art? Would you have changed anything? Did you want these in the show? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, or tweet your thoughts at Roundtable Vids. And for more of my own thoughts, you can find me at OstrikVox. We're also on Instagram. Special thanks to Janky Bones for creating an awesome thumbnail. For more of their amazing art, you can find them on Tumblr at Janky Bones, Twitter and Instagram at BoneJanky, and subscribe to their YouTube channel. Link in the description. Help them to grow by either becoming a member of this channel or supporting us over at Patreon. Link in the description. If you enjoyed this video, please throw it a like and subscribe to the Roundtable for more great cartoon content. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have an awesome day. OstrikVox, signing out.